Chapter 2572. Shui Xian'er's clone could only feel despair. Yes, Chu Lur had fulfilled her promise. However, Shui Xian'er's current body had no cultivation at all. She might not even be as strong as an ordinary woman. No matter who she met, whether it was a human or a beast, she would only die if she walked out of here. Wild beasts didn't care about how beautiful a woman was. They only cared about the desire for good food. No man would let go of such a weak and peerless beauty. But this peerless beauty's identity was so shocking. Then, they could only finish her off after they had done that thing. Even if no one made things difficult for her, with her current body condition, how could she cross hundreds of thousands of miles to find the saint and the real body? 30 hours without any cultivation was a very long period of time. It was enough time for anything to happen. It could happen thousands of times, or even more times. Shui Xian'er was stunned for a while. Then, she smiled bitterly and said, "So I'm doomed. You were just fooling me, fooling me." She murmured, and her voice became more and more desperate, and more vicious. It was a kind of extreme hatred. Looking at Chu Lur's indifferent expression, she finally gave up all hope. Her devastatingly beautiful face revealed the most sinister smile as she said, "If there comes a day when I make a comeback, little girl, I definitely won't kill you, and I won't cripple you like how you've crippled me. I'll only cripple your cultivation and sell you to the lowest brothel. I'll let you experience the pleasure of being ridden by thousands of people. You'll live for 100,000 years, 1,000,000 years. Forever and ever." Before she finished speaking, a sword had already nailed her to the ground. Calamity sword. Chu Yang's eyes were cold. He said indifferently, "You won't make a comeback one day. I promise. Also, my promise isn't just limited to you. It's effective on Shui Xian'er's clone and your real body. You can wait underground." The Calamity Sword's devouring power was activated again. A soul that had completely collapsed was facing the unparalleled devouring power of the Calamity Sword. There was no chance for her to escape. Chu Yang wouldn't let go of anyone who dared to curse his sister like this. While everyone was resting in the Saint Emperor Palace, Missouri Tianji had already entered the palace to look for something. After a while, he walked out. He smiled bitterly. Lucky! In his hands were several thick rosters. Sure enough, the experts of the Holy Emperor Palace have been sent to different places. The few of us came here. It's really just a gift. Amo Tianji grinned. Chu Yang laughed. His Calamity Sword flashed and disappeared. Instead, he went into Holy Emperor Palace to look for treasures. Although there were no experts here, there were definitely treasures. Moreover, there would definitely be a lot of them. It should be very, very, very special. After all, this was Holy Emperor Palace. The #1 sacred ground in Heaven Imperial Court. It was still okay if they had fewer treasures. A certain King Yenluo, who hadn't robbed for a long time, was finally going to do it again. In fact, Chu Yang didn't need to deliberately control it anymore. Tribulation Sword could do these things on its own. Where are we going next? Do we need to take another detour? Chu Yang asked. No need. Amo Tianji smiled and said, "Wait for me to transmit this information to the Tianji Intelligence Department, and then announce it to the world. After that, we can travel day and night, and go straight to the big Western Paradise." Amo Tianji smiled and said, "You can't wait, but I can't wait either." Chu Yang nodded. He looked to the west and said softly, "I really don't know. How is Du Xing now? I'm really worried right now." While everyone was waiting for Tribulation Sword to come out, Amo Tianji stood next to Chu Yang, carefully considering something. After thinking for a while, he finally opened his mouth and said, "Chu Yang, what do you think of this doppelganger?" Chu Yang sighed and didn't open his mouth to speak. Amo Tianji also sighed along with him. "I finally understand why at the level of Saint Monarch, one clearly has already touched the door to the next step, but still hasn't really taken another step forward," Chu Yang said deeply. "There's a big chance that it's because of this doppelganger." Amo Tianji nodded, expressing his agreement. With this doppelganger, it's equivalent to not having most of the sense of danger. The more doppelganger, the safer the main body. Even if the main body dies, or even many of the doppelganger die, as long as one doppelganger is still alive, then this person can use this doppelganger to continue living. Moreover, it won't be long before the original body's strength can be recovered, just like being reborn. There's no loss at all. Moreover, one can create another doppelganger at any time to make up for the previous loss. In this way, the danger to oneself is indeed reduced to the minimum, and it's indeed the strongest life-saving method. There's no doubt about this. Chu Yang said. But for martial artists, without danger there's no pressure. And without pressure, how can one advance and take another step forward? But once one has such a heaven-defying life-saving method, who would be willing to not use it? For the sake of a bleak future, one would give up such a wonderful life-saving method. As long as one has the slightest bit of intelligence, one would make a wise choice. And Mo Tianji smiled bitterly and said, "A few days ago, after my cultivation made another breakthrough, I faintly felt that I had naturally comprehended this method of creating doppelganger. But I've been hesitating, and I didn't dare to act rashly. This choice is really difficult. Even if I'm not tempted now, what about later? When I haven't taken another step forward for a long time, when there's a strong enemy attacking, when there's an enemy knocking on my door, will I give up my initial choice and create doppelganger to increase my chances of winning? After all, this temptation is really too great." Chu Yang nodded. "The reason why I asked that question is because of this. I'm in the same situation now. It's after reaching this stage that one will understand the ability to create doppelganger, and a strong desire to create doppelganger. That's why I specifically asked about Shui Xian Er's doppelganger. After creating a doppelganger, the master and the follower can cultivate at the same time, and the speed of cultivation can be increased by a lot, but the result is only to accumulate vital energy. It's useless for breaking through to a new level. In fact, it's even an obstacle. Moreover, among the top experts in the Heaven Imperial Court, as far as I know, the Demon Empress and the Eastern Emperor have never created doppelganger." Chu Zhang said solemnly. "Therefore I feel that this doppelganger might be a kind of—" He stared at Mo Tianji, and then both of them were stunned. After a long while, they said in unison, "A cultivation trap?" Then both of their expressions changed. If they didn't have doubts about this secret technique while they were comprehending it, they really couldn't guarantee that they would give up on this heaven-defying life-saving method. Take Chu Yang and Mo Tianji as an example. Chu Yang might be willing to give up on this secret technique, and continue to forge ahead without turning back. However, with Mo Tianji's personality of planning before acting, and his temperament of looking at the big picture, he really might not be able to resist this temptation. Because, if this was a cultivation trap, then under normal circumstances, it was almost a fatal temptation that couldn't be resisted. The higher one's cultivation was, the higher one's status was, the more one would know how precious life was. Everything would come to an end after one day of impermanence, and nothing could be done after leaving. Everyone wanted to maintain such a high and mighty status. But at the same time, they also felt that in this world, there were too many dangers that could cause experts like them to lose their lives. No matter what level an expert was at, it was the same. And at this time, this kind of secret technique appeared. As long as one cultivated a doppelganger, one could eliminate these dangers. It was really the best choice. Not to mention, there were many additional benefits to cultivating a doppelganger. Who could resist the temptation of such a magical secret technique? And there was the most obvious example. The Heavenly Emperor of Purple Clouds, Zi Hao, didn't use the doppelganger technique. Once he died in battle, there was no chance for him to make a comeback. Under such a powerful example, who could resist the temptation to cultivate this perfect, secret technique of creating a doppelganger? But once it was started, it meant that one had jumped into a trap. From then on, one could practice the technique, improve one's cultivation, and purify one's power. But if one wanted to take a step further and jump out of the range of this heavenly imperial court, it would become something impossible. The path of cultivation was equivalent to coming to an end here. But if one continued to cultivate, it was also full of danger. Who knew, one might be struck by the heavenly tribulation in the next moment? So, the temptation of this doppelganger could be imagined. So, this secret technique of creating doppelganger, Chuyang said word by word. We can't use it. No one can use it. We definitely can't use it. You can't even think about it. Chuyang deliberately emphasized it 3 times. And Mo Tianji said in horror, Yes, I'll inform all the brothers immediately. I must inform all the brothers at the first possible moment. The lifespan that the heavens give everyone is actually only a little more than 100 years in the first place. To be able to live for more than 100 years is already considered a long lifespan. Some people decline due to various reasons, and there are even some who die prematurely at birth. But those are all personal opportunities, Chuyang said deeply. And the path of cultivation is to go against the heavens and change one's fate. From the moment one starts to cultivate, one starts to fight against the heavens to take back what one is about to lose. To extend one's future path infinitely. On this path, with every step forward, the pressure one has to endure is also a step greater. So, in human nature, there is an instinctive desire to seek good fortune and avoid calamity. This may be a benefit that the heavens give to ordinary people, but to cultivators, every such opportunity is actually a trap that will bury one's future. The more perfect an opportunity looks, the more likely it is to hide a great danger. To go against the heavens and move forward, how can there be any leeway? So, we can't do it. Chuyang's voice was awe-inspiring and full of decisiveness. We can't stop here. Chapter 2573. Perhaps when we've truly transcended the control of heaven and earth, it won't be too late to talk about this doppelganger. Chuyang smiled. But when that time comes, do we still need to create doppelganger? And Mo Tianji also laughed heartily. Only after Chuyang had finished speaking did Mo Tianji truly dispel the idea of creating doppelganger. Mo Tianji himself also recognized that this was a trap, but this temptation was really too tempting. It was practically an exceptional secret technique tailor-made for people like Mo Tianji. Therefore, Mo Tianji having this kind of idea was actually a reasonable matter. Let's ask, with Mo Tianji's intelligence and wisdom, he had this kind of impulse, let alone other people. Because doppelganger could obtain too many advantages, and could do too many things. For example, right now, if Mo Tianji had a doppelganger, his main body could accompany Chuyang to battle here, and the other doppelganger could be in the big western paradise to help Gu Duxing deal with the crisis. If there was one more, he could even take care of Ao Xieyun's side. This was really an irresistible temptation. Therefore, when Mo Tianji had learned about the doppelganger secret technique, he had been so excited. With this method, he could even more perfectly deal with the unfavorable situation before him, and even many subsequent problems would no longer be a problem. But Chuyang had directly and mercilessly cut off this delusion. The saint is also an extremely intelligent person, but he still chose to create doppelganger. Mo Tianji let out a long sigh of relief. His heart was somewhat afraid, and his back was also covered in cold sweat. With the saint's intelligence, he couldn't have not known that this was a cultivation trap. But he still chose to do so. This was what he had thought a moment ago. It was completely the same. Perhaps only a sufficiently intelligent person would step into this cultivation trap, a person who truly wholeheartedly pursues the martial path. On the contrary, they wouldn't fall into this trap. Chuyang somewhat couldn't help but laugh as he looked at Mo Tianji. Among us brothers, the one with the strongest desire should be you, Tianji. Mo Tianji's face flushed red, and there was an intense embarrassment. Like Gu Duxing and Dong Wushang, these two people would rather die than create doppelganger. GMO and Luo Kadi. His way of thinking and acting is closer to Gu Duxing and Dong Wushang, while Ao Xieyun and Xia Danqiong are closer to you. He definitely won't cultivate it. His nirvana divine ability is more advantageous than the cloning secret skill. He is the one we don't need to worry about, Chu Zhang said. Therefore, we only need to remind Ao Xieyun and Xia Danqiu. That will do. Tianji, Chu Yang muttered. Finally, he said, on the path of cultivation there are times when you don't need to be so smart. You know what I'm talking about. Mo Tianji nodded deeply. His face was full of vigilance. Chu Yangran said, I've heard of such a story. Outside a village, there's a forest. No one has ever been able to pass through this forest. Naturally, no one knows what it's like outside the forest. According to ancient legends, this is the land of the jungle. There were man-eating demons. There were wolves, insects, tigers, leopards, and countless dangers. As long as a person went in, there was no hope of coming out alive. Everyone has been instilled with this kind of thinking by the elders in the village since they were young. There were also many smart people who tried to solve this mystery. However, as long as they walked into the jungle, they never came out again. It was as if the legend in the village was so unbreakable and unshakable. Until one day, someone made a bet that whoever went in and still came out alive would have to marry the most beautiful girl in the village. So, a young man walked in. But not long after he walked in, he died. Another young man also walked in. But he also died. For some reason, when he reached a certain place, he died just like that without any warning. Finally, a very simple and honest young man expressed his willingness to try. The people in the village usually called him a fool. Because other than working, he didn't know anything else. But he loved that girl deeply. In order to marry her, he was willing to try. So, he also walked into the jungle. Chu Yang paused. 2 months later, he came back alive. He also brought back many things from outside the jungle. He said that there was a city outside the jungle, a very big city. As long as you can pass through the jungle, you will be able to reach it. Everyone was very curious. Why were so many smart people unable to pass through the jungle, but only this half-fool could pass through it? A few brave young men followed the fool through the jungle. They finally understood that in this jungle, there was actually not much danger. It was just that the jungle was too dense, and there were some hidden dangers like poisonous snakes or poisonous mushrooms. At most, there were only a few wolves. As long as you were brave enough to walk forward, you would definitely be able to get out. But the truly terrifying part of this jungle was that it was really big, deep, and dense. Without a few days of continuous walking, it was impossible to pass through it. And every night, the surrounding atmosphere would become abnormally terrifying. So many smart people who walked in, but most of them did not die in the jungle. In those hidden dangers of the jungle, they were all scared to death by themselves. But a simple-minded and honest person who did not think of anything finally walked out and came back. Because his heart did not have so many distracting thoughts. Chu Zhang said, let's not talk about how interesting this story is, or how illogical and unreasonable it is, but this is the story. I'm done. The usually calm and collected Mo Tianji was already sweating profusely. After a while, he said in a low voice, yes. He understood the hidden meaning behind Chu Yang's story. Most of the time, people needed to be smart and intelligent in life. Smart and intelligent could solve most of the problems in life. However, under certain circumstances, only by stubbornly walking forward could one reach the other side. As the saying goes, more haste, less speed. What one can see but not reach, this also applied to smart people. If this story was told to others, it might not have any effect. But to Mo Tianji, it was like a blow to the head. Wisdom imbuement. A voice full of anticipation said. Then, what happened next? Did this young man marry the girl he loved? The two of them turned and saw Chu Lur, Mo Layer, Xin Yang, Wu Qianqian, Tai Butian. These women were waiting expectantly for Chu Yang to continue. They did not care at all about the logic behind this story. To women, what they really cared about was not the logic but whether this young man married the girl in the end. Logic and whatnot were not important to women, including the careless Xin Yang, the talented Tai Butian, and Wu Qianqian, who was once the king of Hell Chu. They were all waiting, anticipating a perfect ending. Towards this mentality of women, Chu Yang and Mo Tianji were both dumbfounded, speechless, and even at a loss of what to do. Oh my! Mo Qingwu and Chu Lur pouted in dissatisfaction. What exactly are you thinking about? Did that person marry the girl or not? Hurry up and tell us, isn't it just a matter of a sentence? Chu Yang was speechless. You all know that it's just a matter of a sentence. Can't you finish it yourself? Do you have to ask? Besides, in this story, is it important whether he marries the girl or not? It was completely, not even close. Women, what exactly are you thinking? Of course, to Chu Yang and Mo Tianji, they already knew that they could not reason with women. They were all people who had been taught a painful lesson. If they tried to reason with women, there would only be one outcome, and that was a very, very tragic outcome. Digression: this principle is definitely applicable to most men and women. Please take this as a warning and do not try to change this principle. Otherwise, you will also end up very, very miserable. There was an awkward silence for a long while. This story has actually already ended here. Mo Tianji spread out his hands, speechless. Who cares about whether the girl is married or not? These are two completely different things. That won't do. That's even more wrong. Isn't the core of this story about a lover getting what he wants? Chu Lur and Mo Qingwu objected fiercely. So, it's definitely not finished, right? Big brother, hurry up and tell us, stop beating around the bush. Did that silly boy marry the girl or not? What else is there after that? Chu Yang was tongue-tied for a while. Finally, he said with a black face, after this young man went back, he married the girl, and then the story came to an end. He had originally intended to go along with the women's tastes and express the end, but this sentence caused even more trouble. How did it come to an end? And how did he marry the girl? What was the reaction of the villagers? Were they envious? There were also many who were jealous, right? What did the girl say? Would she have agreed so easily? This matter itself is unfair to that girl. Just a stupid bet ruined that girl's future for the rest of her life. Yes. How did this honest young man follow up? Even if they really got married, what about their wedding? Didn't that honest young man go to the city? He must have some decent betrothal gifts. What exactly were they? Was there anyone in the village who was jealous? Then they sabotaged it. This is an inevitable contradiction in the drama and an inevitable development. Your story is not exciting at all. It's just bones and no meat. It's not interesting at all. You really don't have any creative talent, Sai. How many children did they have in the end? Chu Yang fell into a daze. If he had a choice or a medicine for regret, Chu Yang could swear to the heavens that he would never tell Mo Tianji any boring story. Wasn't that just asking for trouble for himself? And it was asking for trouble. A huge trouble. Chu Yang wailed in his heart, help. Chapter 2574. All the complex emotions in Chu Yang's heart were summed up in these 3 words. Save me. Until the calamity sword came back from its looting, Chu Yang still hadn't finished telling the story that should have been over by the time Mo Tianji understood the truth. Fortunately, the calamity sword came back and flew back into Chu Yang's hands. Chu Yang expressed that he wanted to quickly tidy up this time's harvest. A group of ladies very sensibly and magnanimously expressed their permission, and finally ended this very painful story. Then everyone set off for the big western sky. On the way, Chu Yang was forced to tell half the story, but the permission was temporary. After tidying things up, everyone went on their way. The road was very boring, so they naturally had to tell the follow-up story. Therefore, a certain person told the story while still dealing with endless questions. He kept talking until Chu Yang even had the heart to die. If I had known earlier, I wouldn't have cared if Mo Tianji died. Die the boss, not Tianji. Mo Tianji very rarely personally made a move. From afar, he scouted the road ahead, and together with Rui Butong, they left this dangerous area full of women. GMO and Luo Kudi followed far behind to hold the line. In the name of defending against the pursuers, who didn't know the truth. Regarding Chu Yang's miserable experience, everyone only rejoiced in his misfortune. Only you know how to tell stories. Go on. Talk to death. Die the boss, not die the brothers. This was Calamity's principle, and it hadn't changed in 100,000 years. Even the current Calamity Sword Master was no exception. This group of bastards who don't care about loyalty. Bullshit brothers, I'm already so miserable. No one said they would help. Chu Yang cursed in his heart, and continued to tell the story with a bitter face. He really collapsed. Sigh, no matter what kind of woman. No matter big or small, no matter beautiful or ugly, as long as they heard a love story, no matter what the original starting point was, their eyes would turn green. If you don't let them know the ending of this love story, and especially don't give them a satisfactory ending, then you just wait. Again, if the male compatriots here don't believe me, then you can try. I support you in trying, hee hee. Chu Yang and the others rushed to the big western sky at night. And Mo Tianji's subordinate Heavenly Secret Intelligence Department, the only subordinate organization of the Heavenly Armament Pavilion that hadn't been directly banned, had already spread the news of the Saint Emperor's Palace's destruction like a gust of wind to the entire Heavenly Imperial Court. Almost in an instant. This extremely shocking news was like dropping 70 to 80,000 atomic bombs in the entire Heaven Palace. The entire Heaven Palace was in an uproar. Regardless of whether they were rich or not, they were all buying this information to confirm its authenticity. They were all shaking their heads and sighing in shock. However, in the world of the truly powerful, this news was like a bolt from the blue. Indescribably shocking. For more than 1,000,000 years, Holy Emperor Palace, the supreme and sacred place of the Heaven Imperial Court, had been destroyed just like that since it was built. No one had ever dared to challenge it. In the blink of an eye, all of them were destroyed, as if they had no power to resist at all. According to reliable sources, after the Big Western Skies battle, the solitary emperor was no match for the Saint Emperor and joined hands with his subordinates to attack. In the end, they suffered a crushing defeat. All of their preparations were scattered. Years of painstaking planning. In the end, everything was destroyed. In the end, they flew into a rage and decided to retaliate. One day, the solitary emperor led several of his trusted subordinates to infiltrate the extreme sky. Taking advantage of the Saint Emperor's emptiness, they launched an attack. The Saint Emperor's palace, lacking the Saint Emperor, only had less than 10,000 men. They were unable to resist the solitary emperor who was determined to take revenge. Overnight, the Saint Emperor's palace completely collapsed. The Saint Emperor's palace was completely annihilated. A generation Saint Empress Shui Xian'er also perished. Then, a parenthesis was added. According to speculation, this is most likely the Saint Empress clone. Not the real person. Such explosive news caused the Heaven Palace to be in an uproar. From the apex martial artists to the common people, everyone was talking about it. So much so that there was some disbelief. The powerful Saint Emperor's palace was destroyed just like that. Disappeared just like that? What did the news say? The solitary emperor was no match for the Saint Emperor and joined hands with his subordinates to attack? Angry and retaliating, he led several subordinates to attack the Saint Emperor's palace. The Saint Emperor's palace lacked the Saint Emperor and only had 10,000 men. They were unable to resist and were destroyed. It should be like that, right? Then the solitary emperor's strength seemed to be very, very, very strong, and even the Saint Empress perished? Although the news stated that it was possibly the clone, in the hearts of the people, they only paid attention to the first sentence. A generation's Saint Empress Shui Xian'er also perished. This was even more shocking. In an instant, the entire Heaven Palace was in an uproar. After meals, in the streets and alleys, everyone was talking about it. Do you know? Something big happened. What big thing? The Saint Emperor's palace was annihilated by the solitary emperor. Not a single person was spared, ah! Even the Saint Empress Shui heir was killed, ah! Do you know? Something big happened. What big thing? The Saint Emperor's palace was annihilated by the solitary emperor, ah! I heard that the solitary emperor even killed the Saint Empress Shui heir, ah! I heard that he raped and then killed, ah! Do you know? Something big happened. Just like that, the solitary emperor raped and killed all the men and women in the Saint Emperor's palace. Even the Saint Empress Shui heir was no exception. Ah! I'm so shocked. Tisk tsk. This solitary emperor is really lucky with women. I heard that the Saint Empress was the #1 beauty back then, For a time, rumors spread all over the Heaven Imperial Court. In just a few days it had spread like a god, an immortal, a demon, and a ghost. The story was full of twists and turns. It also became even more confusing and confusing. People were talking about it with their saliva splattering everywhere and beaming with joy, as if they had seen it with their own eyes. The people who heard it were dumbfounded and nodded their heads repeatedly, fascinated. When the experts of the Saint Emperor's palace heard this news, they became even more furious and irritable. When they were outside, they originally wanted to bully and suppress others, but their nest was actually dug up by someone else. This was simply a great humiliation. This news spread to the ears of the saint very quickly. It could be said that, other than the internal members of the Tianji Intelligence Department, he was the first person to know about this news. When he heard this news, the saint fell into a rare silence. Then, he calmly continued to give orders. No one is allowed to act blindly without thinking. Everything will proceed according to the original plan. The saint's calmness at this time made everyone puzzled. His nest had been dug up and the Saint Empress had even done that. How could he still be so nonchalant? What was His Majesty the Saint thinking? But after the saint finished this sentence, he had already left with his hands clasped behind his back. His expression was still calm, and his eyes were still calm. Everyone disperse. Wait for the next order. Only the last voice was transmitted back like this. In another elegant room, the saint was no longer as calm as before. His face was as gloomy as water. Although on the surface he didn't seem to care about the gains and losses, but this unforeseen event was related to his foundation. How could he really not care? Not to mention, there were still many of his women in there. This time, they had all turned into ashes. Heaven and man were forever separated. No one could understand the anger in his heart at this moment. But he suppressed it with all his might. He didn't want others to know or notice. You all just want to use this to provoke me. But no matter what you do now, there will be a day when you all return it to me with interest. I won't allow any of you to die so easily. Just wait. Xingjun Xian silently recited, and memorized the following few names. All the leaders of the Heavenly Armament Pavilion. I won't let any of them off easily. Chu Yang Gu Duxing, Xia Danqiong Dong Wushang, Rui Butong, GMO, Luo Kadi, Tan Tan, Ao Xian, and Tai Butian, Zi Xieching, Wu Qianqian, Mo Qing Wu, Mo Leia, and even Dong Wang, Shui Leihan, Yao Xianer, and Mo Qingqing. All of you will die a horrible death. I could scheme Zi how to death that day. Do you think you can be an exception? The saint's heart was still in turmoil, but his face returned to calmness. It was extremely calm and indifferent. Like the waves of the sea, calm and tranquil. The names of Chu Yang and the others were now famous in the Heavenly Armament Pavilion. The saint knew them like the back of his hand. But now, the saint was still uncertain. Were these people in the same group? Was there a unified organization? Or were they just in the nature of allies, but they were fighting for themselves? Who was it that had such a big move? To be able to create such a big commotion, this was undoubtedly the biggest mystery in the saint's heart at this moment. Of all the kidnappers, including their family members, there were only 2 people who hadn't been exposed until now, Mo Tianji and Chu Lur. And of these 2 people who hadn't been exposed, One of them was the #1 poison expert in the world, the one who could silently and soundlessly kill people on a large scale without leaving any traces. Chulur. And the other person was the ultimate source of the chaos in the Heavenly Armament Pavilion, the mastermind behind the scenes who controlled everything. Mo Tianji. I believe that the sage may never know what I've missed out in the end. What is my own mystery, in the end? Beside him was the somewhat pale Western Skies Maniac Sword Heavenly Emperor, Wu Yequang. Your Majesty. Maniac Sword Heavenly Emperor Wu Yequang said softly. I'm afraid this unforeseen event might not have been done by the solitary Emperor. The saint rolled his eyes and said with a faint smile. His faint smile and calm expression concealed a bone-piercing chill. Even someone like the Maniac Sword Heavenly Emperor couldn't help but tremble when he saw his calm expression. Chapter 2575. At that time, when the solitary Emperor made the final decisive battle, we gathered all the power of the big Western Skies upper echelons to meet him. At the most crucial moment, His Majesty, the Sage Monarch, personally made a move to change the situation of the battle, seriously injuring Gu Duxing and Nat Buluqing. Although these two people were ultimately lucky enough to escape under the cover of the self-detonation of countless experts of the Heavenly Armament Pavilion, their injuries were absolutely not fake. According to my conjecture, under such serious injuries, even if they had rare elixirs and pure cultivation to recover, the fact that these two people could stand up now is already a great miracle. Not to mention that they completely recovered in such a short period of time, rushed 270,000 li, sneak attacked the Sage Monarch Palace, and destroyed the entire Sage Monarch Palace, and even the entire battle strength of the Sage Monarch Palace. This is absolutely impossible, Wu Yequang carefully said. Thinking of that decisive battle, Wu Yequang still felt his mind shake, and even had lingering fears. He had lived for more than 1,000,000 years, and had experienced countless battles, but had never had any battle that was so desperate to that extent. But the Heavenly Armament Pavilion did it. Gu Duxing's Heavenly Armament Pavilion, in the face of the entire Heavenly Court's power, unexpectedly occupied the upper hand, and even had the Sage Monarch Palace's experts powerfully intervened, and attacked from two sides, but they still fought desperately. Although they were defeated, they were not routed, until the Sage Monarch personally made a move, seriously injuring Gu Duxing and Buluqing, and they were thoroughly defeated. However, the battle was not over yet, because the solitary Emperor was seriously injured by the Sage Monarch, and the battle after he was defeated truly moved everyone to think of it, and made them look askance. Originally, when Gu Duxing was defeated, the Sage Monarch Palace and the big Western Skies experts thought that victory and defeat was clear. The battle situation was already set, but unexpectedly, the Heavenly Armament Pavilion's experts, seeing Gu Duxing seriously injured at first, not only did they not become timid, but their fighting spirit soared. In order to cover Gu Duxing's escape, every person of the Heavenly Armament Pavilion dashed forward without thinking of their own safety, and with continuous self-detonation, they attacked as if they were going to die. Unexpectedly, they stopped the Sage Monarch's pursuit of Gu Duxing's footsteps. That kind of heroism, even now when he thought of it, made Wu Yequang's back feel cold. Fortunately, on that day, he welcomed those self-detonation-type attacks. It was the Sage Monarch himself. If it was himself, Wu Yequang really did not dare to think of it. The Sage Monarch snorted, and his teacup. His eyes revealed intense anger. During the battle that day, he had clearly chosen the best time to attack. Thus, Buluqing and Gu Duxing were severely injured at the same time. While the other party's momentum was at its peak, he defeated them head-on. If there was a flaw, then the only flaw was that he couldn't kill the two of them on the spot. Then, the situation of the Heavenly Armament Pavilion took a turn for the worse. However, they did not expect that thousands of saints would suddenly go crazy at that moment. 300 people. At the same time, he self-detonated while the sage was chasing after him. There were still 700 people who were fighting with their lives on the line. Not to kill the enemy, but to obstruct them. Gu Duxing and Bulu Qing were nowhere to be found by the time these people were eliminated under such a tragic cover. Even the sage's heaven-toppling and earth-toppling technique couldn't find its whereabouts. A little flaw led to the biggest regret. It even led to such a serious consequence. It didn't matter whether the culprit behind the destruction of the Holy Emperor Palace was Duxing, Heavenly Emperor, or not. But it was certain that Gu Duxing was closely related to him. Of course, this was not done by Gu Duxing. The sage snorted coldly. They attacked the Holy Emperor Palace with the purpose of creating a diversion and besieging the way to rescue the Zhao. Do you think it's so easy to divert my attention? Your Majesty is wise, Wu Yaquang said respectfully. However, Your Majesty is wise and far-sighted. Although you can remain unmoved, others may not. Wu Yaquang frowned. Do we need? No need. The sage frowned. Only in this way, when everyone's hearts are shaken and flaws appear, will they dare to come. We need to create opportunities for them. Only then will they have the guts to come. The sage's eyes flashed with a trace of coldness. We just need them to come. As long as they come, they will be buried here. If the Holy Emperor Palace is gone, we can rebuild it in the future. If experts are gone, we can recruit and nurture new ones. If grandsons are gone, we can have more. If wives are gone, we can find new ones. Because there's still me. With me here, even if people's hearts are shaken, even if there are flaws, so what? How can a few jumping clowns shake the big picture? The sage's voice was flat without ripples. And if these jumping clowns of the Heavenly Armament Pavilion are gone, then they really are gone. Wu Yaquang only felt a chill rise up his spine. At this moment, he almost shivered. Regarding the remnants of the Heavenly Armament Pavilion, your big Western Skies official search and capture. The sage looked at Wu Yaquang. Is too perfunctory. Wu Yaquang smiled bitterly. Previously, there was a continuous year and a half of fighting. The big Western Skies elites have already been lost. Moreover, these people of the Heavenly Armament Pavilion are extremely united. Even if we occasionally catch a few, no matter what kind of punishment we use, they won't reveal any useful information. If they're forced into a corner, they'll commit suicide. There are even a few people who, seeing that they won't be spared, simply kill themselves. Your Majesty doesn't need to worry for the time being. I'll give the order to quickly investigate. Seeing that the sage's complexion was gradually becoming somewhat unsightly, Wu Yaquang tactfully hurriedly followed up with a promise. We must catch Gu Duxing in the shortest time possible. This is very important. Go then. Watching the crazed sword Heavenly Emperor leave, the teacup in the sage's hand silently turned into fine powder. His expression was malicious, and he muttered, Only a doppelganger died. Only a doppelganger died. There was an indescribable feeling in his voice. But one could faintly hear that there was a kind of regret. In some hidden place in the big western sky, Gu Duxing, dressed in black, calmly stood there. Behind him was the similarly seriously injured Bulu Qing. At his side, there was also Gu Miaoling, who was gasping for breath. It was clear at a glance that these three people were already exhausted to the extreme. The heavy pills that Gu Duxing carried at his side had already been distributed by Gu Miaoling to Gu Duxing and Bulu Qing. However, in the face of the injuries that the sage had personally created, the heavy pills could alleviate a little. But the effect that they could have was already not much. Previously, when everyone was treating GMO, they had mentioned that the sage's power was already mixed with the power of law. And this was precisely the special injury that the heavy pills were unable to eliminate. Previously, at the most critical moment, Bulu Qing had burned his soul force and all of his life's potential as the price to erupt with his final strength. At that time, he had already been seriously injured and unable to move, forcibly breaking through the battlefield with Gu Duxing. He only had enough time to bring Gu Miaoling and escape from the battlefield amidst the chaos. At the moment when the sage had just made his move. Because Bulu Qing was a bit further away. Moreover, at the crucial moment, Gu Duxing had single-handedly blocked the majority of the sage's attacks, preserving a part of his battle strength for him. It was also because of this that Buluqing had the strength to break out of the siege at the final moment. At that time, the sage had made his move. Buluqing, who had been on the battlefield for a long time and was even more proficient in understanding the key points, immediately knew, "It's over, there's no more luck in this battle." Therefore, he made a prompt decision, dragging Gu Duxing and immediately fleeing. He himself didn't even distinguish any direction, only knowing that in the chaos, he was fleeing in the opposite direction of the most chaotic battlefield, breaking through layers upon layers of obstacles, avoiding who knows how many interceptions. Only then could he be considered to have shaken off his pursuers. Finally, when he reached the lakeside and wanted to leap over the lake to escape, he fell in midair. The three of them fell to the bottom of the lake at the same time. At that moment, Buluqing had already reached the point where he was like a lamp that had run out of oil. If not for that lake, the three of them might really have been finished. It was Gu Miaoling, who had the weakest cultivation, who dragged the two big men to the lakeside at that time, found a hidden water cave and hid in it. Then, she drained all the water inside, and sealed the entrance from the outside. This cave was equivalent to being submerged underwater, forming a secret space. Chu Yan had previously left a total of 3 heavy pills for Gu Duxing, and Gu Miaoling had given each of them one. Buluqing had previously burned his soul force and all of his life potential, and his injuries were extremely serious, but the heavy pills were still relatively effective for such injuries. Although it couldn't turn the situation around, but for a short period of time, his life wasn't in danger. The one who was truly in trouble was Gu Duxing, who had suffered heavy injuries from the sage. In addition to his internal and external injuries, there was also the threat of the power of the law, and the effectiveness of one heavy pill was limited. Gu Miaoling was helpless, and could only give the last heavy pill to Gu Duxing. Fortunately, although this heavy pill was still affected by the power of the law, it still prevented Gu Duxing's injuries from worsening. Until today, Gu Duxing finally woke up. As long as a person woke up, it meant that there was a turning point. That day, GMO had been heavily injured by the sage, and had never woken up, so he couldn't use his cultivation to resist the sage's special power that had invaded his body. In that situation, any external force or special medicine had extremely limited effects, but when the injured person regained consciousness, he could take the initiative to resist his injuries and heal himself. Although it might not be able to expel the power of the law, his condition was still much better. But after waking up, Gu Duxing remained expressionless, and had been standing for a long time. As long as he woke up, he refused to lie down, and even more refused to sit, and insisted on standing like this. After a long time, Gu Duxing hoarsely asked, "Sister Xiao Miao, where is this place?" Speaking of which, the two had been married for a long time, but I still call you Sister Xiao Miao, and you call me little brother. Gu Miaoling gently said, "This is outside the battlefield. I also don't know where this place is, but it's very safe. You should recuperate well, and don't think about anything else." Gu Duxing listened to the sound of water outside and said, "This is the bottom of the water." "Yes, it should be." Gu Miaoling dragged her equally tired body, and took out some dry rations from the space ring, and said, "You should eat something first, your injuries are not light, you should recover your strength first, and then we can slowly think of a way." Gu Duxing woodenly agreed, and took the dry rations, and put them in his mouth. But after chewing 2 mouthfuls, he suddenly spat out a mouthful of blood, and even the dry rations that he had just chewed up were sprayed on the ground. Chapter 2576. Gu Miaoling could only be ranked second when it came to the number of people who were always by Gu Duxing's side. The black dragon sword was Gu Duxing's personal weapon that never left his side. Whether it was eating, sleeping, or bathing, it never left his side. In this battle, it was also lost. Only when Chu Yang and Mo Tianji's group of brothers come, can we be considered to have passed the crisis. Gu Miaoling thought. Little brother, no matter when, I will accompany you. If you win, I will accompany you to rule the world and look down on the universe. If you lose, I will accompany you to make a comeback. If you die, I will accompany you to assimilate the withered bones and walk in the spring with you. Even if my soul is scattered and my spirit is destroyed, I will also transform into a cloud of smoke in the vast sky. Gu Duxing was adjusting his breathing. But just as he absorbed a wisp of spiritual energy into his dantian, he felt a spiritual energy whirlpool forming above his head. Suddenly, he felt that something was wrong. He immediately stopped and opened his eyes. What's wrong? Gu Miaoling sensed the change in spiritual energy and immediately asked. This won't do. If I mobilize the spiritual energy in the sky, a small amount of spiritual energy is not enough to support my healing. But if I mobilize a large amount of spiritual energy, it will inevitably cause a big commotion in the sky. There is a great chance that the enemy will notice. They must be searching for our whereabouts now. Gu Duxing said. We don't have any external help now. Boss and the others can't come in a short time. Once we are discovered, only death awaits. Gu Miaoling was stunned. Then what should we do? If he couldn't even heal, then wouldn't that be an even more dead end? Gu Duxing pursed his lips. He pondered and said, We are underwater now. Water also has spiritual energy. And underground, there is also spiritual energy. Let me try and see if I can absorb water and underground, life energy. There was too much uncertainty in his voice. Because he had a similar feeling before. That was when he was 3 days in the heavenly layer continent. But, after cultivating, he still felt that it was not as sharp as directly absorbing spiritual energy from the sky. Moreover, the spiritual energy underground was thick. It did not seem to match with his sharp swordsmanship at that time, so he stopped trying. Until now, he thought of it again. Now that he had been forced into a corner, this was the only path he could try his best to take. Then give it a try. It must be possible. The heavens bless the good, and the heavens never seal off all paths. Gu Miaoling encouraged. Gu Duxing nodded. He closed his eyes and began to try. Gradually, he began to try to absorb the vital energy in the water and underground. Instead, he discarded all the vital energy in the air. He couldn't let Sister Xiao Miao and Buluqing die here because of him. Therefore, the top couldn't be moved. Gu Duxing thought so. He started to circulate his energy. Gradually, he entered a meditative state. Perhaps even he himself did not expect this. His helpless action today had allowed him to truly step into the supreme great Tao of swordsmanship where fire and water came from the same source, yin and yang walked the same path, and heaven and earth became one. The power of earth was completely different from the power of vast sky. If there was only one of the two, it would inevitably be biased. Although he could still reach an extremely high level, his yin and yang would always be out of balance. Only by becoming one with heaven and earth could one truly become an immortal. While Gu Duxing was regulating his breathing, time was also slowly passing by. Dong Wushang, Xia Danqiong, and the others were like shooting stars chasing after the moon. Their hearts burned like fire as they rushed towards Big Western Sky. Only when they stepped into Big Western Sky's borders did they know how desperate Gu Duxing's battle was. In the past, they only heard rumors, and knew some numbers from Tianji Intelligence Department's information. However, only when they truly faced this world did they know that Gu Duxing was not easy. The moment they truly saw the battlefield, only then did they know this battle was actually so heaven-shaking and peerless. This is the battlefield of that day's great battle? A 7-star bodyguard had already used the most cruel method of separating tendons and dislocating bones to interrogate the captive that had just been captured. This guy was a military officer of Big Western Sky, but he was forcibly captured by a 7-star bodyguard from the military camp. Even when he was captured, this guy was doing something by himself, and was not wearing any clothes on his body. The great battle had just ended, and he had experienced such a desperate campaign. As a military officer, doing something else was also understandable. Still, Mo Laer could not bear to watch, and allowed him to put on his clothes. Yes, this is the place. This is really the battlefield of that day. This general impatiently looked at the several evil people in front of him, his face filled with an expression that was almost about to collapse. He cried and howled. Why don't you believe me? What I said was the truth. Lying and beating me is not wrong, but what I said was the truth. Why, Thinking about how since he had been captured, it had not been much time since he had been captured, and he had already endured as if he had reincarnated 18 times in the 18 layers of hell, yet he was still not allowed to die. This general almost wanted to dig out his own heart and swear an oath. This was really too torturous. These people were too evil, too cruel, what was that? Your mother's fart! Lying with your eyes wide open, and you still dare to feel wronged? Dong Wushang slapped his face and fiercely roared. This place is clearly a sea. Did your family send troops to war in the sea? Are you all fucking fish? Fighting in the sea? Even if you are all fish, are Duxing Heavenly Emperor's side also fish? Truth? Bullshit truth. Dong Wushang was originally a very calm person. Among his brothers, besides Gu Duxing, he was the most taciturn. But thinking that Gu Duxing was currently in a situation where life and death were uncertain, whether intentionally or unintentionally, he always had a kind of impulse to destroy the world. Originally, this place was the heaven-inserting mountain range of the Big Western Sky. Casually ask the people of the Big Western Sky, and they would know. How can this be faked? It really is several mountain ranges. This general felt so wrong that he wanted to cry again. I didn't lie, what I said was the truth. This was the battlefield of that day's great battle. Why don't you believe what I said? Xie Danqiong stopped Dong Wushang, who was about to open his mouth again, and asked pensively. You mean to say, this place was originally a plain? A mountainous region? But after that battle, it became a sea? At this moment, this general looked at Xie Danqiong as if he was looking at his own father, and nodded like he was pounding garlic. Yes, it was like this. It really was like this. He was so moved that he almost cried again. My dear mother, there's finally someone who can understand the human language. My dear father, I've finally met you. That battle, how many troops did both sides dispatch? Xie Danqiong stood up and looked at the vast ocean-like body of water in front of him. It was boundless, and his complexion was heavy. A single battle had directly turned the land into a sea. How much energy was needed to create this situation? Xie Danqiong had already faintly guessed what kind of attack Gu Duxing and his army had encountered, and what kind of attack they had endured. Our Big Western Sky's side dispatched 23 million elite battle strength. This general's tears and snot mingled together. The other side, the solitary emperor's side, probably only had a little more than 14 million people. After this great battle, countless brothers have all thrown their bones here. The total military strength of both sides reached 37 million people. Dong Wushang, Mo Lair, and Xie Danqiong all sucked in a mouthful of cold air. You tell me in detail about that battle from beginning to end, Xie Danqiong said. At the same time, his complexion became gloomy. I didn't expect it to be on such a scale. That day, when I dealt with Yuan Tianji, I didn't mobilize such a large amount of military strength. Second brother Gu, how are you now? In that battle, the solitary emperor led the army. Their offensive was like a tide, and their imposing manner was like a rainbow. They finally approached here. As long as they advanced another 3,000 li, they would reach the Western Sky imperial capital. At that time, the situation was tantamount to already forcing our Big Western Sky to a dead end. Every army that came to rescue the king assembled, and the imperial guards all moved out, but the battle situation was still extremely not optimistic. Although this guy's strength wasn't good, when he talked about things, it was clear and logical. At that time, the Big Western Sky side gathered 23 million troops. They were nicknamed an army of billions. Both sides agreed to carry out the final decisive battle here. After the battle, the winner would be the king, and the loser would be the bandit. There would be no complaints or regrets. Xie Danqiong took a deep breath. Who proposed this? It was our mad sword Sky Emperor, this person said. Fuck! Dong Wuxiang cursed. Looking at the current battle situation, combined with the situation at that time, anyone could guess that this so-called final decisive battle was a conspiracy. From beginning to end, it was a conspiracy through and through. But at that time, it had already reached this stage. But it also didn't allow Gu Duxing to shrink back. Besides, there was a precedent. At that time, Dong Wuxiang defeated Extreme Heaven Merciless Heavenly Emperor Zui Wuqing. The winner would be the king, and the loser would be the bandit. Not long ago, Ao Xie Yun similarly defeated Heavenly Emperor Qing Xiao, and also smoothly ascended the throne. Now, the big Western Sky Emperor Wu Yaquang also proposed this kind of challenge to Gu Duxing. If he were Gu Duxing, would he accept? This choice already didn't need to be questioned. Since this battle could decide the world and reduce casualties, how could he not accept? If he could decide the world in one battle, in the future when he counterattacked the heavenly demons, he could have more strength to participate in the battle. From beginning to end, the advantages outweighed the disadvantages. Besides, even if Wu Yaquang acted shamelessly afterwards, Gu Duxing also had confidence that he would undoubtedly win this battle. Moreover, to Gu Duxing, the temptation of accomplishing everything in one battle was too big. Besides the enemy dying a lot less, his own brothers could also avoid sacrificing themselves. Therefore, Gu Duxing really didn't have any reason to refuse. And this conspiracy, or perhaps it could be said to be an overt plot, was formed at this time. In that battle, both sides brought their troops forward. Heavenly Emperor Duxing set up a big camp at the base of Heavenly Moat Peak, and 100 li across from him was our big Western Sky Army. And Heavenly Moat Peak was the main peak of the mountain range. And behind the continuous mountain range was the sea. Chapter 2577. Following this sentence, Dong Wuxiang and Xie Danqiong simultaneously looked towards the Great Sea. Immediately, the two Sky Emperors opened negotiations and settled on the method of battle for both sides. The solitary emperor leaned towards a small-scale decisive battle, with the masses as witnesses, deciding victory or defeat in one battle. But the frenzied sword Sky Emperor leaned towards a full-scale decisive battle. One side's battle formation completely collapsed and ended. Everyone sighed together. With Gu Duxing's heroic spirit, he naturally hoped that a large-scale battle could be avoided. Only the battle between himself and Wu Yi, although there was a certain degree of risk, was the best conclusion that Gu Duxing recognized. The final decision was that both sides would send out 10,000 elites for a decisive battle. But, at the moment when the 10,000 experts of the big Western Sky were defeated one by one, and were on the verge of total collapse, I don't know who gave the order, but the big Western Sky's army of 10 million moved out together. In the blink of an eye, the 10,000 people of the solitary emperor were surrounded. To actually be able to do this kind of thing, truly despicable and shameless. Xie Danqiong and Dong Wuxiang cursed at the same time. A Sky Emperor could unexpectedly go back on his word in the midst of defeat, and eat his words in front of tens of millions of people. This was truly an unbelievable matter. Seeing this, the subordinates of the solitary emperor were furious. At the same time, they rushed up, and an extremely large-scale chaotic battle broke out just like that. This guy looked at Dong Wuxiang and Xie Danqiong's unsightly faces, and very tactfully took the initiative to stand on Gu Duxing's side. Although the frenzied sword Sky Emperor used a trick and temporarily obtained a bit of the initiative, under the fierce offensive of the solitary emperor's heavenly armament pavilion, he quickly fell into a disadvantageous position again. The solitary emperor's heavenly armament pavilion's command was effective, and the soldiers were attentive. The soldiers risked their lives, and after this great battle continued for a day and night, the heavenly armament pavilion's side occupied the absolute upper hand. At that time, the entire battlefield was dyed red with blood, and both sides suffered disastrous casualties. It was a scene of devastation, and the battle situation had already reached a clear moment. The solitary emperor led the experts under his command, and directly pressured the big Western Sky Army. The frenzied Sword Sky Emperor could no longer avoid it. He could only come forward to meet the battle, but, at the most crucial moment, the Holy Emperor's palace's men suddenly appeared and joined the battle. The Holy Emperor's palace's side had thousands of high-level saint experts and above fly into the battlefield, instantly changing the situation. The one who truly played a decisive role was still His Majesty the Sage Monarch himself. His Majesty, the Sage Monarch, had heavily injured the solitary martial emperor the first time he had attacked. Following which, the battle started to become one-sided. The solitary emperor's heavenly armament pavilion had no leader. However, there were still 1,000 experts who used self-detonation and risked their lives to stop the sage from pursuing the solitary emperor. The solitary emperor didn't fall and his current whereabouts are unknown. This section was not the knowledge of this officer. It was a conclusion drawn by the experts of Holy Emperor Palace after the battle. If not for that. Even so, no matter how many ordinary experts there were, they still wouldn't be able to obstruct the pursuit of a saint. This was the only way. Only by directly triggering the power of heaven and earth, destroying the terrain and merging the ocean and the land into one in the violent explosion could the powerful spiritual sense be blocked. Then, the heavenly armament pavilion, which was at the end of its road, finally had tens of thousands of experts self-destruct at the same time. They blasted apart the mountain range on the other side, collapsing over 200 mountain peaks, allowing the boundless ocean to rush in, trapping both friend and foe in the midst of the raging waves. At this point, we have finally stopped His Majesty the Sage Monarch from pursuing the solitary emperor, and this battle has come to an end. All the injured people who were trapped in the raging waves were exhausted and heavily injured. They couldn't differentiate between friend and foe and were all buried in the raging waves. There was no longer any hope of survival. Of the 14 million elite troops of the solitary emperor, less than 2 million were able to withdraw from the battlefield. Even these troops have been scattered in the martial world. After listening to this, Xia Danqiong and Dong Wushang felt as if their hearts were being twisted by a knife. Although they knew that Gu Duxing's battle would be tragic, they didn't expect it to be this tragic. With more than 10 million troops against more than 20 million, the victory was sealed in one day and one night, but it was destroyed by Holy Emperor only. Holy Emperor made a move and the experts of Holy Emperor Palace collectively intervened in the battle. Such power! Even if it wasn't just Gu Duxing, even if all the brothers were there, they might not be able to withstand it. The defeat of this battle was expected and reasonable, but it was still extremely painful. Holy Emperor only hadn't intervened in any battle of the heavenly court for more than 1,000,000 years. Who would have thought that he would suddenly make a move at such a crucial moment? And in such a way that was close to a sneak attack. If it wasn't for us destroying one of his bases and completely enraging him, I'm afraid that second brother Gu would have already succeeded. Dong Wushang looked up and sighed. His side had achieved victory, but the consequences were that the brothers had to suffer heavy retaliation. Was all of this worth it or not? Xia Danqiong said deeply. The 10,000 saints' true spirit is a hidden danger that must be eliminated. Even if we have to pay a huge price, it must be eliminated. As for Holy Emperor, we will have to face him sooner or later. In other words, such a loss is unavoidable. Now, the only hope is that nothing happens to second brother Gu. As long as he's still alive, we will have a chance to make a comeback. The most important thing now is to find second brother Gu as soon as possible. He has been severely injured by Holy Emperor, and his situation is very likely to be the same as Ji Mo's. Xia Danqiong said deeply. His eyes fell on the guy in front of him, revealing an undisguised murderous intent. I actually admire the solitary emperor a lot. I've long wanted to surrender, but I didn't have a good chance. Today, I've seen two heroes. This guy hadn't even finished his flattery when he was slapped to death by Xia Danqiong. If you weren't caught, how could you admire Gu Duxing? changing the rudder according to the wind. Such a person's death isn't worth pitying. At this time, a shout came from afar. Who's there? Immediately, a group of people came searching. Dong Wuxiang and the others were worried that they didn't have a place to inquire about Gu Duxing's whereabouts. Seeing that someone had come, they weren't alarmed, but were instead happy, and directly went to greet them. A day later, Xie Danqiong and Dong Wuxiang looked at each other speechlessly, their faces full of worry. On this day, they had killed and repelled no less than 10 big Western Skies troops and horses, and had captured no less than 200 people for interrogation. From low to high, there were officials of all ranks, and the scope of their travel had already expanded to several thousand li in circumference. However, from beginning to end, there was no news of Gu Duxing. It was as if Gu Duxing and Bu Luqing had completely disappeared from this world. Although no news was equal to good news, Gu Duxing had been seriously injured by the Saint Monarch, and his injuries were absolutely not ordinary. This was different from the general situation. The only gain was that they had obtained a piece of news related to Gu Duxing, but also unrelated. The solitary Emperor's Black Dragon sword had already been confirmed to have fallen into the hands of the Crazed Sword Sky Emperor. Since Wu Yaquang was known as the Crazed Sword Sky Emperor, he naturally had a special fondness for swords. Suddenly obtaining such a peerless divine weapon, he truly regarded it as a treasure, unwilling to let it leave his side. How could second brother's sword be left in that bastard's hands? Dong Wuxiang flew into a rage. Xie Danqiong and Mo Layer also flew into a rage at the same time, filled with righteous indignation. However, the real reason was actually, the three people's hearts were filled with fear. They were all afraid. Gu Duxing's sword had always been inseparable. There had always been a saying, if the sword exists, the person exists. If the sword dies, the person dies. Now, the Black Dragon sword was actually in Wu Yaquang's hands. Then, what about the person? The three people didn't even dare to think about it, but they felt waves of stabbing pain in their hearts. No matter what, we have to get second brother's sword back. Dong Wuxiang and Xie Danqiong gritted their teeth. Let's go find Wu Yaquang. Stop right there. Mo Layer was shocked and hurriedly stopped the two people who were about to move. It was reasonable for Dong Wuxiang to have such an impulse, but Xie Danqiong actually didn't care at all at this moment, which made Mo Layer somewhat curious and even more surprised. Do the two of you still think that there will be people who will acknowledge your status as Sky Emperors here? The Saint is here, and he was originally worried that he wouldn't be able to find you. Aren't you just delivering food to him by coming here so rashly? Mo Layer asked unhappily. The two of them panted heavily. But no matter what, the Black Dragon's sword can't fall into Wu Yaquang's hands. Even if we die, we have to get it back. Mo Layer had a helpless look on her face. Have the two of your brains been squeezed together by the door? I didn't say that you can't get it back, but you can use other methods. What methods? The two of them perked up. For example, you can steal it? Mo Layer raised her eyebrows. It's a pity that Rui Budong isn't here either. Dong Wuxiang was a little regretful. If I knew that we would need to steal it, I would have let him come along. Distant water can't put out a nearby fire. Is stealing very difficult? Mo Layer looked at Dong Wuxiang in disdain. In the whole world, only Rui Budong knows how to steal. Have you forgotten what your wife does? How difficult can it be to steal a sword? Dong Wuxiang was taken aback by his wife's sudden words. That's right, he was only thinking about Rui Budong, the godly thief, and neglected his wife's greatest ability? The Black Demon was once the strongest assassin in the heavenly continent, and the one and only. Even in this heavenly imperial court, Dong Wuxiang was still confident that his wife was still the most outstanding assassin in this world. And the most important thing for an assassin was undoubtedly to be invisible. The more outstanding an assassin was, the less traces they would leave behind when they moved. From this point, it was similar to Rui Budong's godly thief technique. Furthermore, the best thief in the world might not kill people, but it was very easy for the best assassin in the world to steal something. Tonight, the 5 of you will go and cause trouble in 5 different directions. Try to make it as big as possible, but don't expose yourself. I will sneak in alone and steal the Black Dragon's sword, Emma said casually. She didn't say a word in her heart. If it was suitable, she would also steal the head of Wu Yekwang. Chapter 2578. All right. Xie Danqiong and Dong Wushang had no objections to Mo.'s arrangement. Mo.'s strength was definitely not inferior to anyone in tribulation. She was even stronger than GMO and Luo Kudi. It could be said that she already had 1 foot in the level of Emperor 1. Even if it was difficult to steal the Black Dragon sword from the Maniac Sword Heavenly Emperor this time, there was no need to worry about her own safety. Yes, we still have to wait. We have to scout for information first. At least, we have to confirm where Wu Yekwang is staying now, Xie Danqiong said. Wu Yekwang regards swords as his life. A divine weapon like the Black Dragon sword will definitely be valued more. So, it must be with him. And there's a high chance that it's stored in his space ring. As a Heavenly Emperor, there must be more than one storage device. So, there are still many difficulties in Layer's operation. Mo.Leia nodded lightly. What Xie Danqiong said was the objective truth. These were indeed problems that needed to be considered. But since Wu Yekwang had fought with Second Brother before, and it was because he was about to lose that he intervened with the strength of a Saint Monarch. Then, with Second Brother's sharpness, it's impossible for Wu Yekwang not to be injured. So, I believe that Layer's operation this time isn't very difficult. When Dong Wushang said this, his expression suddenly changed. He turned his head fiercely and said, Layer, you must remember, you're only going to steal the Black Dragon sword this time, not to kill Wu Yekwang. Do you understand? Xie Danqiong was also shocked when he heard that. Stealing the Black Dragon sword and killing Wu Yekwang were 2 completely different things. If Mo.'s purpose was only to steal the Black Dragon sword, then, no matter what, this matter had more than a 90% chance of success. But if she wanted to use this opportunity to kill Wu Yekwang, even if she really succeeded in killing him, there was also more than a 90% chance that she would lose her own life. This was definitely not a joke. The risk was extremely high. But if she went and faced a heavily injured Maniac Sword Heavenly Emperor, with a chance to kill him in 1 blow, would she do it? So, this was where the greatest risk lay. Mo.' could only give up on the idea. She smiled and nodded. I understand. I only want the Black Dragon sword. That Wu Yekwang is for Second Brother Gu. Xie Danqiong nodded and said, I know that 4th sister-in-law is a sensible person and will definitely not act rashly. If Second Brother Gu can't take revenge personally, it's inevitable that you'll regret it. This sentence made Mo.' really give up on the idea. That night, just as the big Western Skies army was slowly returning, they suddenly encountered an unexpected attack. Enemies were coming from 5 different directions. As far as the eye could see, it was filled with raging flames and shouts of killing shook the heavens. For a moment, it was unknown just how many experts were attacking. There were many tall mountains along the way, but they were actually uprooted and thrown into the large group of people. The mountains of the Heaven Imperial Court were sturdy and had deep roots. Furthermore, with the addition of the Heaven and Earth Spirit Chi, ordinary martial artists, even lifting a piece of rock would be a difficult task. But now, the entire mountain was being thrown down. It would be difficult for anyone below the level of a saint to achieve such a feat. The rumbling sound continued without end. Although the army also had experts, and if they were vigilant, they might not be unable to deal with it. However, this was the time when the previous battle was taking a break, and a group of defeated soldiers and generals had just retreated from the battlefield. Their own strength was inevitably not complete, and at this moment, they were caught off guard and hastily made a move. How could they take care of everything, and there were still many people who were crushed to death? And the enemies in the dark seemed to be completely unwearied. All kinds of tall mountains and all kinds of large rocks flew like raindrops. For a moment, the earth cracked and the mountains collapsed, the earth broke and the sky was startled, so much so that as they walked, a large hole suddenly appeared on the road, and countless soldiers fell down with a bang. This kind of harassment caused the big Western Skies army to be in an extremely difficult situation, and they were completely at a loss. Under the careful protection of the army's experts, although the following attacks basically didn't have much effect, the entire army's soldiers had to be on guard from beginning to end. On this road, they were really jittery, and every bush and tree was an enemy. As long as there was even the slightest sign of trouble, everyone would be in danger, and they would be in a constant state of panic. Everyone's hearts were on the verge of collapse. How many days had it been since they withdrew from that desperate battlefield? The shadow of their deaths still hadn't had enough time to disperse. At night, when they closed their eyes, it seemed as if the heavenly armament pavilion was still charging. Tens of millions of comrades had died here, and they themselves had escaped from death and were still worried about whether or not there would be any repercussions. They didn't expect that they would unexpectedly be attacked here. However, everyone's hearts were prepared, and they all understood. These attacks were undoubtedly from the solitary emperor's subordinate elite experts coming to retaliate. This kind of thing was really very common. In the past few days, they had already suffered no less than several hundred similar attacks. Although the previous attacks weren't as powerful as today's, they were more or less used to it. If they died, then they died, but if they lived, they could only say that they were lucky. With regards to the attackers, they had only encountered 2 of the enemies in the 5 directions. After a big battle, the enemies didn't try to be brave and act rashly. As soon as they saw that things weren't good, they quickly fled. As for the other 3 directions, they simply disappeared without a trace. Even if they had encountered those 2 people, they were fighting with their faces covered, but the strength of these 2 people was really a bit too terrifying. If it weren't for the fact that the other side didn't have the heart to continue fighting, and really went all out to meet them, they were afraid that all of the people who had participated in intercepting them would have completely lost their lives in their hands. Therefore, the experts who had participated in the battle all had lingering fears. The strength of these 2 enemies was really too strong. Although they didn't dare to say these words clearly, they all had their own guesses in their hearts. The strength of the enemies they had encountered. I'm afraid they weren't inferior to His Majesty the Crazed Sword Heavenly Emperor, so much so that they were even stronger. Could these 2 people be the solitary emperor and Buluchin who had reappeared in the mortal world to counterattack the big western sky? Although they clearly knew that this was impossible, everyone's hearts were still covered with a layer of shadow. It was as if they could see those 2 heaven-shocking and exceptional treasured swords rushing over with the power to chop through the clouds and heaven and earth. Just thinking about it made their backs break out in cold sweat and their whole bodies turn cold. Previously, hundreds of people had surrounded them, but a third of them had been destroyed by the other side. They hadn't even used weapons. Furthermore, among those people who had been destroyed, there were still many high-level saint experts. How could the scene before their eyes not make them terrified? Everyone had lingering fears in their hearts. Your sister, the next time we encounter an attack, will passively wait in the camp. If a big stone is thrown, we'll deal with the big stone. If a big mountain is thrown, we'll deal with the big mountain. But, even if we die, we won't go out and face the person who threw the stone. This is too damn dangerous. It was a mess. Amo Layer quietly entered the main camp. With her ability to hide and conceal her tracks that had already reached the pinnacle, wandering around in this kind of extremely chaotic main camp naturally could be said to be effortless. However, wanting to find the frenzied sword Heavenly Emperor Wu Yakuang's location in this kind of chaotic military camp was still somewhat difficult. Checking one camp after another, she then gave up and rushed forward. Every camp that Mo Layer chose to check was the core camp. Those were places where the frenzied sword Heavenly Emperor might be located. Furthermore, they had to possess the atmosphere of tight security. Mo Layer continuously checked dozens of camps like this, but she still didn't find anything. Time was limited, and the results of checking like this were too low. Mo Layer finally simply jumped high into the air, checking all the way according to the imposing manner. Finally, almost at the very front of the camp, the atmosphere was even more strict, greatly different from the core camp that she had checked before. Mo Layer couldn't help but pat her own head. She was still used to being an assassin in the past 3 days, and her habitual thinking was restricted. She always thought that hiding and concealing her tracks would mean sneaking in. In fact, she should have chosen to start checking from the air early on. This was simply clear at a glance. If she did this early on, she would probably have found the target long ago, and might even have succeeded already. Vexed, Mo Layer's body was like a breeze, silently wandering in midair, checking every camp. At this moment, Wu Yaquang was recuperating in his own tent. That battle with Gu Duxing previously really caused him quite a lot of damage. Although he was currently in a state of rapid movement, Wu Yaquang was still trying his best to recuperate and recover, but he was still weak now. Gu Duxing's sword aura was still in his body until now, constantly destroying his body. This made the frenzied sword Heavenly Emperor suffer unspeakably, but he could only grit his teeth and swallow his blood. He couldn't say it out loud, and he couldn't show any signs of pain. The dignity of a sovereign still had to be maintained. Furthermore, he had to pay attention to extravagance as usual. This wasn't extravagance and wastage, but to stabilize the morale of the army. To create an atmosphere of everything is under my control, there's no need to worry about anything. Therefore, the tent he was in now could be said to be ingenious, dignified, rich, and luxurious. Everything was not inferior to the furniture he had in the capital. As a heavenly emperor, he still had this bit of extravagance. The surroundings of the camp where Wu Yaquang was in were completely silent. In fact, there were people everywhere, but not the slightest sound of breathing could be heard. Not even the sound of mounts could be heard. Only the howling of the wind blew past, but it seemed to blow past in empty space. If not for the occasional rustling of the flags, even if someone walked past, they probably wouldn't know that there were hundreds of thousands of people here. Just this point alone was enough to show how elite this group of people was. They had already reached a sensational level. The surroundings were sealed by the divine senses of 8 peak-level saints working together. If Wu Yaquang wanted to look outside, he only needed to release his divine senses and touch, and he would be able to hear all the movements in the outside world. But the people outside definitely wouldn't hear anything in this tent. Unless Wu Yaquang allowed it. And Wu Yaquang definitely wouldn't allow it. This was Wu Yaquang's usual habit. He definitely didn't want anyone to know about his private life. This was human nature in the first place. A heavenly emperor had higher requirements in this aspect, and his execution was also more perfect. Now, he had just circulated his energy to suppress Gu Duxing's sword aura and felt a little better. At the same time that he was cursing Gu Duxing in his heart, his hand was also playing with the sword. It was that black dragon sword. Chapter 2579. The body of the black dragon sword was long and slender. It was clearly a bright color, but when everyone looked at it, they would feel that this sword was black. This was the result of the craftsman's unique ingenuity during the forging process. Although Chu Yang had used a large amount of heavenly materials to reforge this sword many times, the original appearance of this sword had never changed. The hilt of the sword was a very simple dragon head. Although it was simple, when anyone looked at it, they would immediately feel like they were looking at an all-powerful dragon. At the position of the guard, there was a slightly protruding dragon claw. It was only a vague shape, but its scales and claws flew naturally, filled with a cold and domineering aura. And it was this domineering aura filled with cold and arrogance that gave Wu Yaquang an abrupt feeling. Because this should be Gu Duxing's long process of communicating with the sword heart of the black dragon sword. Gu Duxing's lonely and arrogant aura was tainted by Gu Duxing's. This lonely and arrogant aura made Wu Yaquang feel a faint pain in his body. He took 2 deep breaths. The body of the sword was slender, and the tip was slender. That bloodthirsty feeling was faintly emitted. Only, Wu Yaquang's eyes were filled with regret. The source of his regret was, this sword was not seized by him personally. But that day, the attack of the saint already had the power to destroy the black dragon's sword. And at that time, Gu Duxing took the initiative to throw the sword away in order to protect himself. This caused the black dragon's sword to be forced away from him. Otherwise, the only outcome would be that the black dragon's sword would be broken first, sacrificing himself to protect Gu Duxing. "It is truly a peerless divine weapon!" Wu Yequang exclaimed in admiration and took out his own sword. He poured the same amount of energy into both swords and waved them at the same time. A ray of cold light flashed. The two swords collided with each other without any fuss. Clang! A soft sword sound rang. The sword that Wu Yequang took out later broke into two. The front half fell to the ground with a clang, the tip of the sword jumping with cold light. But the black dragon's sword was not damaged at all. "Good sword!" Wu Yequang praised from the bottom of his heart. Although the sword that he had just taken out was not the strongest divine weapon that he had always used, it was still within the range of the celestial imperial court. However, it was absolutely a treasured sword that could be counted as a divine weapon. How could a treasured sword that could be collected by a celestial emperor be ordinary? But it was this kind of divine weapon. Under the peerless sharpness of the black dragon's sword, it did not have any ability to resist at all. It couldn't even leave the slightest bit of damage to the black dragon's sword. The black dragon's sword was something that Wu Yequang had never seen before. The most outstanding sword. This made his heart ache. Greed was aroused. Who wouldn't want to own such a peerless divine blade? He frowned as he stared at the black dragon's sword. There was a question in his heart: why did the sage seize this sword and not keep it for himself, but instead give it to me? Even if it was the holy monarch, he wouldn't be able to resist such a divine weapon, right? Why didn't he want it? This question flashed through his mind. His mind was once again occupied by the black dragon's sword. He was happy that the sword had finally fallen into his hands. He was a little hesitant in his heart, because the black dragon's sword already had a complete sword soul. And the formation of this sword soul was because of Gu Duxing. Gu Duxing accompanied it with his heart, supported it with his sword's resolve, nourished it with his divine soul, accompanied it day and night, forming the sword soul. Therefore, this sword soul was completely loyal to Gu Duxing and would never betray him. If Wu Yequang wanted to completely possess this sword, he must obtain the recognition of the sword soul. But to do this, he must defeat the original owner of the sword head-on, which was to defeat Gu Duxing face to face. This point, to Wu Yequang, was simply powerless. Of course, Wu Yequang could also choose to destroy the sword soul. But if he wanted to erase this sword soul, he could possess this sword forever and no longer need to worry about being devoured. But the level of this sword would immediately drop, degenerating into an ordinary weapon. The only thing that could be retained was the sharpness, this characteristic. It would no longer have any other mystical functions. It was as if a person had lost all consciousness and turned into a walking corpse. This way of doing things was equivalent to destroying this divine weapon. To the frenzied sword heavenly emperor who loved swords like his life, this was clearly unacceptable. Letting out a sigh, Wu Yequang started trying again. His divine sense slowly entered the long sword and started trying to soften the sword soul again. With Wu Yequang's strength, wanting to subdue the sword soul in one go was absolutely impossible. He could only choose the second-rate softening strategy. Clang! The black dragon's sword suddenly emitted a sword cry full of rage, seemingly angry, resisting, and resisting. However, Wu Yequang's divine sense still continued to enter, releasing a warm aura, seemingly appeasing, completely without any evil thoughts. He even released his heart domain, opening up his complete inner heart, in order to obtain the black dragon sword's recognition with the most candid and honest attitude. But the black dragon's sword did not appreciate it at all. The sword body flickered, emitting sword cries of resistance one after another. Clang! Clang, clang, clang! Clang! Wu Yequang could clearly feel what these sword cries respectively represented. Get lost! Get lost! Get lost! I don't want you! Hurry up and get lost! It was as if Gu Duxing was still in control of this sword. As Wu Yequang's divine sense continued to enter, the black dragon's sword was finally enraged and completely exploded. A gust of black gas suddenly condensed from the sword body, and a small black dragon appeared out of nowhere. The small black dragon's eyes were filled with indescribable anger and hatred. Then, with a sharp cry, it transformed into a sharp sword aura, flashing towards Wu Yequang. Cough! Wu Yequang immediately retracted his divine sense and retreated in a flash. That sword aura just now was not very strong, not even enough to break through Wu Yequang's protective cultivation, but it had the sharpness to cut Wu Yequang's divine sense in half. Looking at that small black dragon shaking its head and wagging its tail, and turning around the sword body in victory, it actually felt a little proud. Wu Yequang was completely out of ideas. He could not subdue it in one go, and he could not soften it slowly either. It was obvious that neither force nor persuasion worked. It was just a sword. It was actually the most difficult piece of meat to deal with. Frowning, he said in distress. Do I have to destroy it? Destroy this rare divine sword? Amolea quietly approached this tent from a high altitude. In an instant, she already felt the mental blockade of several high-level saints. If she wanted to forcibly break through this blockade and go in, she could actually do it. But if she wanted to quietly sneak in without alerting these people, it was absolutely impossible. Amolea carefully observed the divine sense blockade below, actively thinking of a way. Even if the chances were slim, she still had to put in 1,200% effort. Because right now, she was already completely certain. The one inside this tent was definitely the frenzied sword Heavenly Emperor, Wu Yequang. This was already a fact that did not need to be doubted. She believed that other than the frenzied sword Heavenly Emperor, in the core area of the Big Western Skies official military camp, there was no one else who had the qualifications to make 8 peak-level saints guard the door for him. But right now, the core issue was, how should I go in? I still have to go in without alerting anyone. If I can't even go in, how can I still talk about stealing the sword? Far away, the rumbling sounds were still unending. That was Dong Wushang and the others creating chaos. It must be said that Dong Wushang and the others created chaos very, very well. Mo Yutian and the other 7-star guards strictly followed Mo Layer's instructions and acted carefully. They created one incident after another, but from start to finish, they did not expose their whereabouts. And Dong Wushang and Xia Danqiong, these 2 heavenly emperors, were not creating chaos at all. They were simply venting their anger. After concealing themselves for a while, they very straightforwardly launched a frontal attack, vigorously venting the anger that had accumulated during this period of time. Just based on their current strength, after experiencing the battle with the Saint Monarch's clone, as well as Chu Yang's guidance, their cultivation had also made considerable progress. Purely based on the understanding of the realm, they were probably already above Gu Duxing, who was fighting with Wu Yequang. Even if Wu Yequang personally came out to deal with them, he might not necessarily be able to deal with any one of them. With them launching a frontal attack like this, how could those big Western Sky soldiers who had been attacked be alright? At least they still remembered to scrupulously abide by Mo Layer's request and did not launch a large-scale massacre. If they really launched an unbridled massacre, then the number of people who would die would certainly be many. Of course, now that they did not know the movements of the Saint Monarch's side, if they rashly launched all their strength, it might attract the Saint Monarch's side. That way, not only would they really beat the grass to scare the snake, it might even lead to a fatal disaster. Therefore, concealing their strength was still very necessary. Currently, the premise was still to create local chaos. But those chaos, to the ordinary soldiers, perhaps would be incessantly complaining, but to the people guarding here at the Crazed Sword Heavenly Emperor's camp, it did not have any meaning and did not have any effect at all. They seemed to be deaf and blind, unable to hear or see at all. They turned a blind eye to the chaos of the army. They simply would not move a bit from their position. Behind Mo Layer's veil, her pretty face was gloomy and her eyebrows were slightly knitted. In the blink of an eye, she had already thought of no less than 70 to 80 methods, but she felt that none of them were useful. Now, she could only continue to wait for a turning point. Just as she was pondering, suddenly, A sword chime came from below. All the movements in this tent were sealed by the saint's divine senses. By right, no sound should be transmitted out. But this sword chime seemed to have passed through the sound of the soul and came out from the heavy seal of the divine senses. Layer's heart stirred, and she instantly no longer hesitated. This sword chime gave birth to a kind of intuition. That was Gu Duxing's black dragon's sword. Furthermore, it should be Wu Yakuang currently attempting to remove the influence of Gu Duxing's divine sense. And only this kind of thing born from the spirituality of heaven and earth could break through the heavy seal of the divine senses here and make a sound. The extreme anger of the sword chime made Layer directly no longer consider. If she found the black dragon's sword, she would be able to find Gu Duxing. Because, with the guidance of the sword's soul. But if the sword's soul was destroyed, then it would really be like looking for a needle in a haystack. Her body moved, and she silently swept down from a height of 10,000 feet. At this moment, Layer was like a black wind, falling like a meteor in the boundless night sky. Chapter 2580. Wu Yakuang held the black dragon sword in his hand, full of helplessness, full of reluctance. Just now, when the sword spirit appeared, that sword energy completely showed its unyielding determination. A loyal minister would not serve two masters. The divine sword also naturally chose its master. Wu Yakuang had tried both subduing and softening, but they were all unsuccessful. And if he wanted to change this situation, unless Gu Duxing really died, but very unfortunately, from the moment he obtained the black dragon's sword, Wu Yakuang knew that Gu Duxing did not die. The reason was very simple. If Gu Duxing died, the sword spirit that was closely related to his soul would definitely be affected. It was not that he did not want to rely on the black dragon sword's response to guide him to find Gu Duxing, but Wu Yakuang was very quickly disappointed. The black dragon sword completely did not listen to his command. Moreover, it saw him as an enemy. Other than resisting Wu Yakuang's erasure, the rest of the time, it did nothing. Going out for a stroll, it also did nothing. This kind of completely uncooperative, how could he find Gu Duxing? If it really had that plan, Wu Yakuang absolutely would not doubt. Not only would the black dragon sword not help him find Gu Duxing, it could even possibly bring him to the other Heavenly Armament Pavilion's headquarters and kill him. Wu Yakuang sighed helplessly and was about to put away the black dragon sword. To really erase the black dragon sword's sword spirit, Wu Yakuang really was still reluctant. But just at this time, an unforeseen event occurred. Suddenly, heaven and earth shook, and Wu Yakuang could not help but be shocked. Layer's entire person fell like a meteor, falling extremely fast, instantly coming into contact with the saint's divine sense. But in the first moment, she broke through the blockade, and with a boom, she directly rushed into the tent. The several experts responsible for guarding outside only felt their own divine sense suddenly shake. The layers of divine sense blockade that they painstakingly laid down were unexpectedly broken through in the first moment by someone using the most barbaric method. Without exception, all of their divine senses were damaged. Everyone was shocked at the same time and jumped up one after another. But they immediately discovered that a figure had already rushed into the tent. Although it was only the blink of an eye, someone indeed went in. Protect the Emperor! Several people all had the same thought, and rushed in. The guards all around were also vigilant at the same time. The entire camp was in chaos. The only area that was originally considered calm in the entire western sky also became chaotic. Just as Wu Yakuang's fingers touched the black dragon sword's hilt, the roof of the tent suddenly collapsed. It collapsed without any warning, and then a fierce gust of wind rushed towards him. Wu Yakuang instinctively retreated and flicked his wrist. His sword was already in his hand. 10,000 rays of golden light were sprinkled out. A strong enemy. Just one sword strike was enough to make him feel that this sudden enemy's cultivation was definitely not below his, and was enough to pose a threat to him. He had to go all out. If he insisted on using the black dragon's sword to fight the enemy at this time, the black dragon's sword would be disloyal to him. Once it backfired, it would cause a certain degree of interference to him, which was tantamount to suicide. This was the result of Wu Yekwang's sudden change. He came to a conclusion in an instant. Therefore, Wu Yekwang chose the best way to face the enemy. Giving up on touching the black dragon's sword, he drew his long sword in his hand, and 10,000 rays of golden light gushed out. Attacking and defending at the same time, both offensive and defensive. First, put yourself in an invincible position. This was his territory. As long as there was a little bit of resistance, the guards outside would swarm in. Even if the incoming person's strength was astonishing and not below his, it was also impossible to pose a threat to him. Boom! The entire tent was instantly torn apart. It was as if a bomb had exploded in the center of the tent. Everything in the tent, without exception, had turned into cotton wool, and was blown away. Then they were shot out. A faintly discernible black-clothed figure quietly existed, and countless rays of cold light suddenly shot out. A low and cold voice said, "Wu Yekwang, your time of death has arrived." Cold light danced and instantly enveloped Heavenly Emperor Maniac's sword's entire body. Although Wu Yekwang was startled, he did not panic. He sneered and said, "Not necessarily." Brandishing his long sword, he defended with all his might and was even more cautious. Clang, 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 Wu Yekwang's body trembled slightly, and he retreated. The other party's hidden weapons came from all directions, everywhere. Each hidden weapon was mixed with tyrannical power. Wu Yekwang had not recovered from his serious injuries to begin with. After the battle with Gu Duxing previously, his vitality had not recovered until now. Suddenly facing such a strong enemy, fighting head-on was absolutely unwise. Moreover, his reinforcements had already arrived. Why should he fight head-on? Defending with all his might was the best strategy. However, Wu Yekwang was secretly alarmed. The other party's killing intent was not concealed at all. It looked like this time, they were here to assassinate him. Such an elusive assassin. It was really impossible to guard against. Wu Yekwang was ultimately a descendant of Di, and his strength was not weak. Although he had not recovered from his serious injuries and Mo Layer's sudden attack was powerful, they were still unable to break through his defense line in an instant. While they were obstructed, the 8 saints outside had already arrived. They roared at the same time and attacked together. "Scoundrel! Die!" That thin and small figure laughed, and suddenly stretched out his hand. As the black dragon sword sheared, it actually automatically landed in the person's hand, as if it was filled with joy and encouragement. Sword light flashed, and all kinds of cold light covered the sky and earth. The all-out attack of the 8 peak-level saints instantly arrived. That person clearly had no time to dodge and was forced to take the attack head-on. With a muffled groan, he spat out a mouthful of blood, and the cold light rushed towards Wu Yekwang. The combined attack of the 8 experts was not a small matter. Although that person was already at the level of D, he was still injured by the combined attack of the 8 experts. However, that person did not retreat and continued to attack Wu Yekwang. "Wu Yekwang! Even if I die today, I want you to die with me." Wu Yekwang retreated and said coldly, "You're not worthy." However, the moment he retreated, everyone thought that the black-robed figure opposite him would definitely launch a fierce attack. The 8 peak-level saints were already prepared to intercept, but the black-robed figure actually shot up into the sky. From rushing forward to flying, there was absolutely no effort at all. In the blink of an eye, he was already 1,000 feet high. In an instant he broke away from the divine senses of the experts, including Wu Yekwang. "Oh no! This fellow's target is actually the black dragon's sword." At this point, everyone finally realized. This was especially true for Wu Yekwang, who was feeling the most regret. He had been too careful. From the moment the black dragon's sword willingly fell into that person's hands, he should have realized that this person was related to the black dragon's sword. Moreover, although this person was strong, it was impossible for him to take his life in a short period of time. He was too careful for a moment, and actually caused the divine sword to be snatched away. This person obviously wanted to escape. Wu Yekwang gritted his teeth. "Want to escape? How could it be so easy? Chase! At all costs! Stop him! After giving the order, Wu Yekwang himself flew out. Countless figures leaped up at the same time and chased after him. At this moment, it was no longer important whether their divine senses had locked onto him or not. The black-robed figure shot up into the sky. His target was obvious and could be seen clearly with the naked eye. Outside Wu Yekwang's tent were Wu Yekwang's most trusted personal guards. They had always been well trained. Those who were qualified to enter this personal guard camp were all experts. The moment the black-robed figure rushed up, countless hidden weapons and arrows covered the entire sky like a swarm of locusts. It was a black mass that could cover the sky. Under such a large-scale attack, no matter who it was, they would not be able to completely avoid it. In addition, there were hundreds of experts who had already leaped up high and attacked from all directions. It was believed that even if the sword thief turned into a flying bird, he would definitely not be able to fly out. Facing the countless attacks, Mo Layer did not show any signs of fear. With a long whistle, she spat out all the turbid air in her stomach. Suddenly, a white light flashed. The warm snow sword, which had disappeared without a trace, suddenly appeared. The people below only saw her waving her right hand, and the hidden weapons in the sky were all mysteriously cut off. That was not the end of it. The hidden weapons that filled the sky actually changed direction with the wave of the sword and shot down in all directions. Returned to where they came from. At this moment, it was as if a rainstorm of hidden weapons had suddenly fallen from the sky. Pu-pu-pu-pu. Below, there were endless screams of agony. The experts who surrounded her all felt a chill in their hearts. This person was actually an expert at the level of DE Empress. If it was not an expert at this level, it would definitely be impossible to create such a sharp counterattack. However, even if the other party was really an expert at the level of DE Empress, there was a limit to one's strength. Under such circumstances, facing so many of them at the same time, I believe that you won't be able to gain any advantage. The attacks came at the same time. However, Mo Layer let out a muffled groan this time. She suddenly removed all the protection on her body and turned it into a pushing force under her feet. With a swift spin, her entire person seemed to have turned into a tornado, creating a black hole out of thin air. Whoosh! When the attacks of hundreds of experts came at the same time, the boundless force shattered the entire space into pieces. However, the tornado that Mo Layer had turned into had the ability to turn and dissipate everything. It destroyed 70 to 80% of the hundreds of attacks, but the remaining force still hit Mo Layer. Mo Layer violently spat out a mouthful of blood, but her entire person used the remaining force to soar up into the sky like a shooting star. At this moment, everyone watched as the black-robed person broke through the white clouds in the sky and disappeared beyond the white clouds. Almost at the same time, a majestic sword light passed through the place where Mo Layer was standing just now, turning the shattered space into a black hole. This was the all-out attack that the maniac's sword Heavenly Dharch had just managed to unleash when he reacted. It was not even a blink of an eye away from Mo Layer's departure. Mo Layer turned into a tornado, and used the attack power to leave even if she was injured. It was because of this. Because the maniac's sword Heavenly Dharch Wu Yekwang had awakened. Furthermore, he had joined the battle once again. If she was really surrounded, Mo Layer would probably not have any chance of survival in today's battle. One Wu Yekwang was enough to entangle her to death, and the other experts could totally wear her down easily. Therefore, Mo Layer made a prompt decision to flee thousands of miles away. She came without a shadow and left without a trace. Once she succeeded, she disappeared without a trace. This was the typical style of an assassin. Today is especially tiring. I feel especially tired and don't feel like writing. It's probably those days of the month where I don't feel like writing again. I braced myself and typed the words, "First update," urging myself to continue exploding. I didn't count wrongly this time, right? I checked thrice. Chapter 2581. Everything that happened during this period seemed long, but in fact, it happened in the blink of an eye. From Mo Layer falling down, entering the tent, forcing Wu Yekwang to retreat, snatching the black dragon's sword and then leaving, the whole process added up to only half a breath's time. At this moment, Mo Layer had already flown away, but the battle intent of the people here had yet to dissipate, and they had yet to land. The maniac sword Heavenly Emperor Wu Yekwang stared at the direction Mo Layer left in, but the anger in his heart was almost burning. The divine weapon that he had just gotten, the treasure that he treasured so much, seemed to have been lost just like that. He didn't even know who the person was. At the same time, an unprecedented sense of fear rose in him. It seemed that there had never been a time when he was so close to death like today. Even when the former fought with Gu Duxing, although the situation was clear at that time, it wasn't to the extent where he could be killed immediately. There had also never been a time when the enemy was already above his head and he actually didn't realize it. How could there be such a thing? There was actually such a terrifying killer in the world. Being targeted by such a killer, could he still sleep peacefully in the future? Wu Yekwang felt one thing very clearly. If the real purpose of this thin-masked man was not that sword but to assassinate him, as long as he was willing to pay the appropriate price, then he would very likely already be a corpse now. A corpse whose soul had been destroyed. If his strength was at its peak, the other party might not be able to take his life. Or perhaps they could fight until both sides suffered great losses. But now, he was injured by Gu Duxing's sword. The other party could definitely kill him. Although his final counterattack could also seriously injure the other party and allow the guards to join forces to kill this killer, by that time, he would definitely be dead, long dead. Once he was impermanent, then everything would be meaningless. This masked man in black, who exactly is he? Wu Yekwang frowned, his face dark. In this world, when did so many peak super experts appear? Why is this so? Countless questions. It made Wu Yekwang's heart a mess. Yes, before this, the peak experts in the entire Heaven Imperial Court. There were only a few of them, Empress, only me, Saint. Perhaps, there were a few unknown experts in hiding. But, since those who had been hiding in seclusion had chosen to hide from the world, since he had hidden for so long, he would continue to hide. There was nothing to be afraid of. However, ever since Yuan Tianji was executed, that inexplicable Heavenly Armament Pavilion organization appeared one after another. It seemed that the so-called peak experts were as cheap as cabbages. They appeared one after another, each more terrifying than the last. Gu Duxing was already the most powerful young expert he had ever seen in his life. His strength was above his own. Today, he came into contact with this black-clothed man. Although the time they had been in contact was short, the threat that the black-robed man brought to him was almost above that of Gu Duxing. When he faced Gu Duxing, perhaps he would be defeated, but he would have the opportunity to escape unscathed. But if he were to face this black-robed man today, although he would have the power to take him down with him, he was destined to be buried together with him. Therefore, Wu Yekwang was even more fearful of Mo Layer than Gu Duxing. Motherfucker, even if it's like bamboo shoots after a spring rain, it can't be this fast. So many! Wu Yekwang cursed angrily. Another long howl came from afar. Several silhouettes suddenly appeared in midair. One by one, they were all masked and dressed in black. Just one of them appeared, and an unprecedentedly powerful and crazy aura had already shrouded the entire camp. All the big Western sky experts were shocked. Peak experts. Peak experts again. Why are there so many peak experts? Are we all dreaming, or has this world gone crazy? A majestic voice said. Wu Yekwang! Tonight I'll temporarily spare your dog life. In the future, let Gu Duxing personally wipe away this disgrace, chop off your dog head and use it as a chamber pot. Ha! Following a loud laugh, those several silhouettes flickered in midair and instantly disappeared without a trace. Everyone was unexpectedly too late to chase after them. These people should be Gu Duxing's brothers. Wu Yekwang's gaze was deep, and he said thoughtfully, Perhaps they are the new candidates for the Sky Emperor's position that have appeared in every world. Humph, humph, wanting to unify the heavenly imperial court, how could it be so easy? Even if I agree, that person won't agree. Wu Yequang's thoughts had yet to finish when a rainbow suddenly appeared. The rainbow converged, and the sage's figure appeared in front of Wu Yequang. What happened here? Unexpectedly, the auras of many present-age experts have appeared. Your Majesty the Sage! Everyone knelt down and saluted. Just now, there was an assassin who came to assassinate me, but failed. As he fled, he seized the opportunity to steal Gu Duxing's black dragon's sword. Wu Yequang said. Oh? The sage's gaze flashed. The black dragon's sword was really stolen? Yes. Wu Yequang's entire face was red with shame. It was really stolen. That is to say, His Majesty the Sage never believed that he could really protect the black dragon's sword. As the Sky Emperor of a generation, he was actually looked down upon like this. But unfortunately, he was guessed correctly. This recognition in fact really made Wu Yequang unable to show his face. Even if the person who said this was the sage, Wu Yequang still felt that his own self-esteem was seriously damaged. This is a good thing, the sage said indifferently. That day, when I obtained the black dragon's sword, why I didn't keep it for myself, but instead gave it to you, was for today. Now that this sword has finally been stolen, it can also be considered as a big stone in my heart falling to the ground. Very good, very good. Wu Yequang carefully digested the sage's words. He couldn't help but raise his head in disbelief. His Majesty the Sage has always been waiting for the day when the black dragon's sword is stolen? Of course. The sage's eyes were cold. He said slowly, If that black dragon's sword wasn't stolen by the traitor's accomplices, where would we find Gu Duxing to kill? Relying on your incompetent subordinates? Could it be? Wu Yequang was surprised and happy at the same time. His Majesty the Sage also left a divine sense on the black dragon's sword? The sage smiled indifferently and didn't say anything. There was only a calm look on his face, as if everything was under his control. After so many battles, there was only the battle with Gu Duxing. Although the battle was short, although Gu Duxing was no match for him and was immediately seriously injured, the sage still felt a sense of danger. If Gu Duxing continued to grow, he reckoned, it was very likely that he would become a very big threat to him. This feeling of danger even exceeded that of Shui Leihan and Zi Hao. This was the sage's premonition. And the sage had never doubted his own premonition. Back then, Zi Hao was so amazing, and Shui Leihan was so domineering. But the sage also felt threatened. But he had never felt such a life and death crisis. But when he faced Gu Duxing and his black dragon's sword, in that instant, he clearly felt it. And this feeling was something that the sage couldn't tolerate. The black dragon's sword is in my hands. They can't find me, and they don't dare to steal it. But it's different in your hands. They won't take you seriously, because you're just. The sage suddenly stopped halfway through his words. The reason why the sage had said these words was because he felt that his scheme had succeeded. He needed an audience to share with him. But he stopped halfway because he saw that Wu Yequang's expression had already become very ugly. It was completely green. They don't dare to provoke the sage, but am I, Wu Yequang, a small character that can be easily bullied? In particular, the sage's unfinished sentence almost made Wu Yequang vomit blood. Because you're just. Just what? Wu Yequang scolded angrily. I'm just your grandpa. Fuck. How can you insult me like this? No matter what, you're still a celestial emperor. But on the surface, Wu Yequang obviously didn't show anything. More accurately, he didn't dare to show anything. The sage very untimely took back the words that he was about to say. He said indifferently, From now on, you have to change your strategy. Command the Western Army. So long as you see people from the Heavenly Armament Pavilion, kill them without question. You'd rather kill 10,000 by mistake than let one person go. Don't accept any form of surrender. Then, mobilize the entire world, and completely annihilate the remnants of the Heavenly Armament Pavilion. Whether or not Wu Yequang was happy or not, The sage really didn't care, and he wouldn't take it to heart. Moreover, hadn't he already taken care of his mood, and didn't say the latter half of his words? I'm really an emperor who cares for his subordinates, even if the other party is only a loyal dog. Only the sage thought so. Yes. Wu Yekwang took a deep breath and answered loudly. The sage had already left. And after the sage left, Wu Yekwang's temper also became very bad. His complexion was gloomy to a certain degree. Perhaps it should be said that when the sage was still here, the mad heavenly emperor's temper was already very bad. It was just that at that time, he didn't dare to show it. Now that the sage had left, this place had once again become his greatest power. Naturally, he didn't need to hide anything. Therefore, being someone's loyal dog was also a skill and endurance. It was very hard to say. Under this kind of atmosphere, everyone who saw him didn't even dare to make a sound. Regarding the black dragon sword that he'd just gone through in that great battle, no one dared to hastily speak out to comfort him. The current Wu Yekwang was just like an explosive barrel that would explode at the slightest touch. Anyone who encountered it would be blown to smithereens. Wu Yekwang's heart was indeed very uncomfortable. It was a kind of indescribable depression. This kind of depression made him want to kill someone. And the person he wanted to kill was absolutely not Gu Duxing, nor was it the person who'd just stolen the black dragon's sword. Rather, it was that sage who just left. There had never been a time when Wu Yekwang felt that he was being despised like this, and even ignored. I'm also one of the empresses of DE. I'm also a recognized peak expert under this sky. Why is it that in the eyes of the people above the clouds, I'm just a tool to lure the enemy? I'm just a person who's used to lure the enemy. The keyboard is broken. I'll go and buy it tomorrow. I'm using a notebook now. There are 2 updates today. Today is 7th Madam's birthday. Yes, student Feng Qiliang. Happy birthday! Chapter 2582. There was a fire burning in Wu Yekwang's heart. And this kind of implementation can only take advantage of my incompetence. Show my incompetence? What kind of fucking bullshit logic is this? Wu Yekwang felt that his self-esteem had been placed on the ground and ruthlessly trampled until there was not a single piece of skin left untouched, and he had no dignity left. I am also a Sky Emperor, on par with the original Yuan Tianji Zi Hao and the current Demon Empress Shui Leihan. We have the same status. Wu Yekwang's heart was indignant. Why am I looked down upon like this? Since when have I been looked down upon like this? When you mentioned the East Emperor Demon Empress, you never spoke like this, never looked down on her like this. But now you treat me with such disdain. Isn't it because I didn't grab hold of your weakness like Yuan Tianji did, and now I'm still attached to you? Do you really think of me as your dog? Wu Yekwang's heart thought like this, and like a fire, it continued to grow and spread, unable to be contained. In his heart, a thought rose up uncontrollably like wild grass. Originally, when I didn't attach myself to you, you were so polite to me, treating me as friendly as a brother. But now, the situation has completely changed. You actually think of me as a subordinate, even ordering me around like a dog? The night wind was ice cold, but Wu Yekwang's heart was burning. Burning with anger. He stood in the wind for a long time, motionless. Since the beginning, there had naturally been many people who distinguished between the two sides. For example, the East Emperor, the Demon Empress, Zi Wuji, and so on. Yuan Tianji, Zhe Wuqing, and Long Yinghuan. They could also be considered to have formed their own style, and there were also many who stood, such as Wu Yekwang and Mo Qingqing. The so-called ones who stood were those who didn't help anyone, but they also didn't ask anyone for help. They were independent. This kind of person in the Sky Emperor and Empress was actually still very popular. Wu Yekwang, as a member of this kind of person, had once been very popular. 2 big camps. No one would easily offend him. But now, when the big western sky had encountered an unprecedented crisis, the sage had extended a helping hand. At the moment of imminent peril, He had saved Wu Yakuang. This result had also brought about a fact that was smoothly organized. The people of the world had placed the big western sky under the sage's category. No matter how unwilling Wu Yakuang was, he could not change this fact. However, the current situation seemed to be even more serious. To put it in a good way, it was better to say it. Wu Yakuang was his subordinate. To put it bluntly, the most powerful vassal was a dog that had been saved by the sage, and that was it. Dong Wushang and the others finally met up with Mo Layer. Dong Wushang was shocked because Mo Layer's face was pale at this moment, and there was blood at the corner of her mouth. She actually looked like she was seriously injured. "How are you?" Dong Wushang asked with heartache as he supported his wife. To tell the truth, Dong Wushang was somewhat unable to accept the fact that his wife was actually injured. He would rather be the one getting hurt. "I'm fine, I'm really fine." Mo Layer smiled. Stealing the black dragon sword this time was like pulling a tooth from a tiger's mouth. "If I didn't pay a price, how could I steal the black dragon sword under the heavy guard of the mad sword Heavenly Emperor? The current situation can be said to be very satisfactory." Dong Wushang thought about it, and felt that this sentence made sense. Moreover, his wife's injuries were not very serious, so he finally smiled and said, "Not bad, not bad, let me see the black dragon's sword." Mo Layer rolled her eyes. This blockhead was really blockhead. At this time, he actually did not know how to comfort her first. He directly changed the topic. "I'm so angry. Don't you know that the more a woman says I'm fine, the more she needs a man to comfort her?" How would Dong Wushang know what his wife was thinking? The moment he heard Mo Layer say that she was fine, he immediately felt relieved and focused on studying the black dragon sword. "Second brother Gu is not dead yet. The black dragon sword's dragon soul is intact. Doesn't this mean that second brother Gu is still alive and well?" Dong Wushang exclaimed excitedly. His voice was really loud and clear. He was so excited that even his voice was trembling. Xie Danqiong was instantly energized. "That's great! This is really the best news at the moment." The haze that shrouded their hearts finally dissipated at this moment. Their moods were also really relaxed. All this while, no one had mentioned this problem. Everyone just said that no news was good news, and they just had to wait for second brother Gu to be found. No one talked about the problem of life and death. Because they did not dare. They really did not dare. But how could they not think about it? Not worry? That was impossible. Now, they could finally confirm it. "The black dragon sword's soul is intact and very lively." Dong Wushang's eyes were brimming with tears. "Thank the heavens!" Xie Danqiong took a deep breath and exhaled. "Thank the heavens! The black dragon sword's soul was intact and very lively." This proved that not only was Gu Duxing not dead, he also did not fall into the hands of Wu Yakuang and the others. If he was captured, Wu Yakuang would immediately execute Gu Duxing just for this sword. "Now that we have the black dragon sword, our chances of finding second brother Gu have greatly increased," Xie Danqiong said excitedly. "Of course." Dong Wushang smiled without hiding his excitement. Then, he sent his divine sense into the black dragon's sword. Not long after, a cloud of black gas emerged from the black dragon's sword, and a small black dragon gradually took shape. The small black dragon opened its small eyes and looked at Dong Wushang pitifully, with a hint of urgent pleading. The black dragon's soul naturally recognized Dong Wushang and Xie Danqiong. The Tribulation Brothers were often together. When the black dragon soul was formed, everyone even celebrated it. The black dragon soul naturally knew that the two people in front of it were its master's best brothers and best friends. Although it could not speak, it did not mean that it did not know anything. Its pleading at this moment was an urgent desire to see its master again. It desperately wanted these two to take it to its master. "Black Dragon, we need your help now. Can you understand?" Dong Wushang looked at the sword's soul and asked nervously. The black dragon coiled on the black dragon's sword. Its small head tilted and looked at Dong Wushang in confusion. After a long while, it nodded, indicating that it might or might not understand. Dong Wushang was delighted when he saw this. He said, "Then can you take us to Gu Duxing now? Go to your master? He is not feeling well now and needs us to help him solve the problem. A very big problem." The black dragon tilted its small head and blinked its bright eyes, revealing an embarrassed look. It shook its head gently. "No?" Dong Wushang asked anxiously. The black dragon shook its head again. "It's not that you can't. Then why are you shaking your head?" Dong Wushang asked. The black dragon looked at him innocently. This time, it did not shake its head but wagged its tail. "What do you mean by wagging your tail?" Dong Wushang's forehead was sweating as he asked a very inappropriate question. The black dragon could not speak at all. "You actually asked it what it meant?" The black dragon looked at him in confusion. It wagged its tail again. "Fuck! This thing can't speak. What should we do?" Dong Wushang finally remembered this crucial problem. He was completely at a loss as he looked at the black dragon. The black dragon was also looking at him in a daze. One man and one dragon stared at each other in a daze, staring at each other in a daze. Whether it was a man or a dragon, their expressions were very gloomy at this moment. Dong Wushang thought, "Is this dragon a stupid dragon?" The little black dragon thought, "Is this person an idiot?" "You idiot! How can you ask questions like that?" Mo Layer finally could not take it anymore. She kicked Dong Wushang to one side. Dong Wushang scratched his head and stood up, looking confused. He was indignant. "How am I an idiot?" Mo Lay ignored him and squatted down in front of the black dragon. "Little black dragon, listen to me. If you understand, nod. If you don't, shake your head. If you don't understand, just stare at me. Do you understand?" Mo Layer said gently. The black dragon blinked and nodded with its head tilted. His eyes were sparkling as he heaved a sigh of relief. Then, it turned to look at Dong Wushang with a look of disdain in its eyes. He seemed to be saying, "Look at how good she is at asking questions. She's not like you, you big idiot. You only know how to be anxious. You even dare to say that you're stupid." Dong Wushang was speechless. Xie Danqiong could not help but burst into laughter. He laughed so hard that his stomach hurt. "Black Dragon, we are going to find your master. Do you know where he is now?" Mo Lay asked. The black dragon's eyes flashed, and it shook its head. "Can you control the sword to fly?" Mo Lay asked. The black dragon looked embarrassed and shook its head again. "Do you know how to find him?" Mo Layer continued to ask. Her voice was especially clear and gentle. The black dragon hesitated and stared at Mo Layer for a moment. Then, it slowly shook its head. "You mean, you can't be sure? Can you?" Mo Lay said. The black dragon stared at Mo Layer. Mo Layer patted her head and said, "So you actually want to say that you know how to find him but don't know how to do it, right?" Mo Layer's words were a bit tongue-twisting and the meaning was very vague. It was even contradictory. But the strange thing was that after she finished speaking, the black dragon quickly nodded in agreement. "How about this? We will take you and search everywhere. You can sense your master's aura. If you find anything, tell us quickly. How about that?" Mo Lay asked. The black dragon nodded happily. At this moment, the little black dragon was so cute that it could kill most girls in the world. "In terms of direction, you are also responsible for guiding us," Mo Lay said. "Which direction should we start from? Give us a general direction." The black dragon shook its head sadly. "Today is the birthday of the leader of the White Tiger War God. Let us wish him a happy birthday. This morning I quickly got up and went back to my hometown to get my keyboards. Cough cough, the 13 keyboards that I broke in the past were all fixed. This time, in a fit of anger, I moved all 13 of them here. When I went upstairs, a guy asked me, you got new stock? How many days can these be sold for?" I was speechless. Aunt Foam laughed so hard that she rocked back and forth. She tried to explain the situation to him. Then the guy looked at me with a gaze as if he was looking at a mountain. "Until now, My self-esteem has not recovered. Chapter 2583. Oh, you don't know this for now. Then let's move in a spiral pattern, gradually widening the distance and running in all directions. Once you feel something in one direction, inform me immediately. Then we'll search in that direction. What do you think? The black dragon nodded fiercely, his eyes sparkling, expressing his agreement. Mo Layer stood up and looked at Dong Wushang. Now you know where you're stupid? Idiot! Dong Wushang scratched his head and said gloomily. What did you mean just now? This and that, do you know? I still don't understand. Pfft. Mo Lei laughed. Right now, the black dragon is at most equivalent to a child who doesn't know how to speak. It's already quite rare for him to be able to understand whatever you say to him. Don't tell me you still expect him to tell you anything too specific? So, you can only ask him questions. The rule is for him to answer by nodding or shaking his head. Then, as long as he can understand, you can roughly understand what he means. But you actually want him to answer, and speak in human language. Aren't you making things difficult for him? Did I wrongly say that you're stupid? Dong Wushang was enlightened. I see. I understand now. I'm indeed very stupid. I didn't even realize this. Xie Danqiong was already laughing so hard that not only did his stomach hurt, he was almost suffering from internal injuries. The three guards also couldn't stop laughing. There's no time to lose. Let's set off immediately, Mo Lei said. Who's holding the black dragon's sword? I'll do it, Dong Wushang volunteered. But once he said this, the black dragon stood up. He actually didn't retract his sword. His small black eyes stared at Dong Wushang in disdain, showing a strong sense of resistance. You idiot! You actually want to hold me? Isn't that a waste of effort? Dong Wushang instantly felt that his self-esteem had suffered a serious blow again. Instantly, he was speechless and depressed. Let me hold it. Mo Layer couldn't help but laugh. Her slender hand reached out to the sword hilt. The little black dragon nodded. Shaking its head and wagging its tail, it turned into a black fog and entered the sword. Obviously, it approved of Mo Lei. Damn! Dong Wushang was stunned for a moment. He turned to Xie Danqiong and said, This thing must be male. It's the same as Ao Xieyun. Xie Danqiong's face turned as red as a juju. Black lines appeared on his forehead. Somewhere far, far away, Ao Xieyun shivered. He scratched his head in confusion. Who's scolding me behind my back? Finally, they reached a consensus. Both the man and the sword were overjoyed. They immediately took action. The group of people and their swords returned to the battlefield where the land had turned into a sea. Mo Layer held the black dragon sword in her hand and used her movement technique to move swiftly. She began to circle in a spiral, without an end. Circle by circle, he gradually increased the range of his swimming. The black dragon sword soul was carefully distinguishing its master's aura. 1 lap, 2 laps, 3 laps. The distance between the swimming circles became larger and larger. The scope of his search grew larger and larger, but he still found nothing, however, whether it was Mo Layer who was moving at full speed, or Dong Wushang, Xie Danqiong, and the others who were watching from the side. None of them showed the slightest bit of impatience. They continued to nervously and meticulously expand the search circle. Everyone firmly believed in one thing. Now that they had the black dragon sword in hand, their search strategy was correct. Then, he would definitely be able to find Gu Du Xing and Bulu Qing. As long as the two of them were found, everyone would be at ease. No matter what kind of injuries Gu Du Xing and Bulu Qing had suffered. As long as they still had a breath left, there would be no problem. Now, Xie Danqiong had enough elixirs that Chu Yang had specially given him. In the worst-case scenario, the two of them would be able to temporarily recover a part of their strength and survive until Chu Yang arrived. One person patiently searched. However, Dong Wushang and the others didn't know that other than them, there was another person who also firmly believed that they would definitely be able to find Gu Du Xing. Therefore, this person was also silently following them, while they were paying attention to the Black Dragon Sword's search for Gu Duxing's whereabouts. This person was also paying close attention to them. In the sky, a white cloud came and went. Sometimes it gathered together, sometimes it dispersed. It floated here and there, completely no different from the other white clouds in the sky. Sometimes, when it dispersed, it would merge into other clouds. It was Cloud Master. This time, in order to capture Gu Duxing, Cloud Master didn't mobilize anyone but himself. If too many people were mobilized, the people below were all peak experts. They would definitely be alerted. Especially Dong Wushang and his wife, as well as Xia Danqiong. They were all world-shaking experts who dominated an area. How could ordinary people be qualified to follow them? Once they were discovered, all of their plans would be for naught. This was a serious matter. They couldn't afford to be careless. In the heart of the saint, this matter was extremely important. The imprint he left on the Black Dragon's sword was really very faint. It was so faint that no one could detect it at all. Only Cloud Master himself was an exception. Only he could clearly know where that imprint had gone to at any time. But even so, he still decided to give chase. He looked down from high up in the sky and waited. He looked forward to the arrival of that moment. As long as this person successfully found Gu Duxing, then, including Gu Duxing, everyone would be killed by the saint in an instant. It's actually Great Emperor Wu Shang and Great Emperor Qianghua. These two actually came personally. This is really beyond my expectations. What a deep brotherhood, humph. The saint snorted coldly. He definitely recognized Dong Wushang and Xia Danqiong. He had directly and indirectly interacted with these two new heavenly imperial great emperors many times. If it was in the past, the saint would probably have already gone down and engaged in a huge battle with these people, killing them all. Although Dong Wushang and Xia Danqiong's strength had improved, if they were to engage in a fierce battle with Cloud Master now, only death would await them. Fortunately, Yun Shangren was only waiting patiently at the moment. At this time, especially, after the battle with Gu Duxing, in the heart of the saint, there was no one else who was more important than Gu Duxing. Because Gu Duxing could actually make me feel that kind of aura of death. No one else had ever given me such a feeling. Including this person below right now. So the life and death of that person below wasn't important. Only if Gu Duxing didn't die would the saint truly be unable to eat or sleep in peace. In fact, in the heart of the saint, all the important matters in front of him were no longer as important as killing Gu Duxing. If he were to make a move now and alert the enemy, Gu Duxing would probably never be caught. On account of the fact that you can help me find Gu Duxing, I'll let you live for a while longer. The saint's eyes stared coldly at the people below as he murmured in his heart. Then, he gently closed his eyes. He didn't even dare to look directly at these people for too long, lest he arouse their vigilance. Although they were separated by a great distance, the sage was still extremely careful. Although these people weren't his match, they definitely couldn't be underestimated. Continue to speed up, speed up. I'll be at ease once Gu Duxing is found. All of you can also go on your way to freedom earlier. The saint looked up at the sky, his body turning into a white cloud as he looked at the endless sky. At this moment, he had already gathered all his cultivation. This was the first time in 1,000,000 years that he had gathered his cultivation like this. As long as he made a move, there couldn't be any mistakes. As long as they really find Gu Duxing, everything will be under their control. In the previous battle, Gu Duxing was severely injured. And with the injuries that Gu Duxing is suffering now, it's not something that can be healed by any heavenly treasure or elixir. They will definitely have to circulate their energy to heal him first. And to heal him, they will definitely have to find a hidden place. When the time comes, I'll make a move at the crucial moment. With a thunderous strike, I'll first get rid of the target, Gu Duxing. Then I'll strangle these people to death one by one. Yes, Great Emperor Wu Shang and his wife can be kept first, nurtured into myriad saints' true spirits. After that, I can calmly wait for the others to come one by one and capture them one by one. The saint's eyes had an extremely cruel smile. Do you think that after ascending to the position of Heavenly Emperor, you can sit back and relax? That you can really stand side by side with Heavenly Emperor One and Empress? Dream on. As long as this operation succeeds, then the hidden power behind will definitely all surface, and I can follow the clues to find the melon, and catch them all in one go. In order to achieve this goal, even if the process is accompanied by many sacrifices, it'll be worth it. Humph. If I didn't purposely leave the Saint Emperor Palace empty, how could you succeed? And since you've succeeded in the battle, your mentality will definitely change. And I can calmly make arrangements and wait for the crucial moment to arrive. The saint's eyes flashed. The only pity is, I only lost a clone of Shuesianer. When did this woman run back? The sage closely followed Xia Danqiong and the others from above, and didn't leave for even a moment. Although Xia Danqiong, Dong Wushang and the rest were already considered top experts, compared to the saint, they were still too far away. Even if they were fully prepared to fight him head-on, they would definitely not be his match. They would definitely be caught in one go. Even the saint wouldn't have to expend too much effort. Moreover, the enemy was in the dark now, and the saint was deliberately hiding his presence, so the situation was even worse. The most fatal thing was, Dong Wushang and the rest were completely unaware. With their cultivation, they were still unable to detect that the biggest enemy in their lives was right above their heads, following them closely like a shadow. But they had sunk into a state of frenzy and excitement, completely tirelessly searching for Gu Duxing's whereabouts. At this moment, everyone's mood was very joyous and very excited. This was a kind of ecstasy of regaining what they had lost, causing everyone to completely ignore the possible danger that they might encounter. Moreover, the journey had been so peaceful that they had lowered their vigilance. Today's small explosion. I'll continue to write the third update. Begging for votes. Chapter 2584. Among the brothers, if Chu Yang and Mo Tianji encountered such a thing, although they would also be very happy, they would still first check their own safety to ensure that nothing went wrong. No matter how bad it was, they would still be able to prepare for a rainy day and lay down a considerable protective measure to ensure that everything was safe. Even if they were really followed, there would at least be room to maneuver. This was a characteristic of the two of them. However, the other brothers were not as careful and prudent as them. Just like the present Dong Wushang and Xia Danqiong, they simply did not consider this point. Originally, although Dong Wushang was straightforward, Xia Danqiong was a cautious and prudent person. However, at this moment, these two people's hearts were somewhat racing. Thinking that their own brothers were urgently waiting for their rescue, they could not help but be anxious. They could not wait to see Gu Duxing in the next moment. However, the two people simply did not know. When they truly found Gu Duxing, it would be when the brothers were completely annihilated. When that time truly arrived, they would be completely unprepared and would be caught unprepared. Furthermore, the one they would face was the current world's undisputed #1 expert, the only sage monarch. At that time, they would truly not have the slightest bit of chance. They incessantly cheered each other on, tirelessly searching, it should be soon, put in more effort. On the other side, Chu Yang and the others traversed the extreme heaven, like chasing the wind and lightning, not even wasting the time to drink water. They did not know how the big western sky was doing, and how Gu Duxing's safety was. Everyone had to hurry over as soon as possible. They sped up the whole way and passed the halfway point. Still, almost no one spoke. Everyone's faces were calm as they turned into rainbows and flew all the way. It seemed that a very bad premonition arose in their hearts. If we are late, something will happen. This kind of extremely negative feeling, especially for Chu Yang, was the most intense. From the start of the journey until now, he had always been somewhat uneasy, but he could not clearly explain what was going on. In order to further increase their speed, Chu Yang simply let Tai Butian and Wu Qian enter the tribulation space to cultivate. The others, under Chu Yang's lead, each and every one of them also risked their lives to hurry on. Thousands of miles of mountains and mountains. Suddenly, they were far away. Finally this day, after another 7,000 miles, we'll be in the territory of the great western sky. Pointing at the boundless sea of clouds in front of them, Emotianji softly said, "We'll arrive there. It's very likely that we'll encounter a battle at the very first moment. So, let's take a short break. I'm afraid that we won't have a chance to rest after this." Chu Yang stopped. His gaze was sharp as he looked ahead. After a while, he nodded lightly. Along the way, there was indeed no chance to rest. Although everyone's strength was extraordinary, they were all exhausted. In such a state, it was still possible for him to press on with his journey. But if he really encountered a strong enemy or was besieged by a large army, he might not be of much help to Gu Duxing. He would be the first to collapse. Just as Mo Tianji had said, the most important thing to do now was to recover and recover. It's time to eat. If you need medicine, come to me. The big western sky is right in front of us, and a great battle can erupt at any time. Chu Yang took a deep breath. I have a premonition. What awaits us when we get there is bound to be an extremely arduous battle. Everyone, by all means, must not relax at all. So, everyone must be in their best condition and throw themselves into the upcoming battle. Chu Yang said heavily. Otherwise, we'll lose without a doubt. Chu Yang spoke so cautiously. Although everyone didn't quite believe it, and even somewhat disapproved of it. They didn't know what basis Chu Yang had for saying this, but they instinctively became vigilant. Everyone had come to the big western sky. There was no need to doubt that they had come to fight. But as for what Chu Yang had said, once they arrived, they wouldn't even have time to catch their breath before fighting, right? Mo Tianji frowned. For the first time, he looked at Chu Yang with some hesitation. Immediately, he put one hand on Jimo's shoulder and took out the Tianji copper coin with his other hand. Mo Tianji had gained the ability to predict the future ever since he had mastered the controlling the world technique. Mo Tianji hadn't been able to fully grasp this ability at the present stage. However, he would be triggered by a certain event, a certain time, or a certain medium. And this would trigger a kind of whim for no reason. Chu Yang's words had inadvertently touched Mo Tianji's mood. And this had triggered a burst of whim. Ever since he had ascended to the heavenly imperial court, this kind of whim was rarely seen, but every time it appeared, it meant that something big was about to happen. What did it mean to be touched at this moment? Mo Tianji didn't dare to be negligent. His cautious nature of wanting to be unafraid of 10,000 things made him immediately take action. The golden copper coin kept rolling in Mo Tianji's right hand, seemingly able to reflect 100 states of the world. Mo Tianji was high in the clouds, looking up at the sky. Immediately, he silently flipped over and soared into the sky. His thin figure in his white clothes flew straight up into the clouds. Chu Yang frowned, watching Mo Tianji's strange movements. Suddenly, he remembered something that Mo Tianji had once said, controlling the world, seeing the future. In this mysterious technique, there was a very magical divination method. The caster cast the spell in the clouds, drawing the power of the stars in the sky, using the firmament as a plate, grasping the ground as the ground, and seeing the mysteries of the heavens with the naked eye. This was called the Heavenly Stars chess set, seeing the future. And now, what Mo Tianji was using should be this mystical technique. This method was undoubtedly the most accurate divination method, but at the same time, it was also the most energy-consuming divination method. Mo Tianji was the same as everyone else, rushing over without stopping. His energy was greatly depleted, and everyone else only expended their physical strength and martial power. Mo Tianji, on top of expending his physical strength and martial power, also had to divide his attention to plan. Therefore, his mental strength was also greatly depleted. Divination methods tested the caster's mental strength the most. Mo Tianji was in a poor state where all three of his powers were depleted, but he still used such an extreme method. One could imagine how bad the situation was. Chu Yang didn't have time to worry about Mo Tianji. Since Mo Tianji knew his situation and still did this, he must have his reasons. He only stared at Mo Tianji moving in the air. The copper coin formed a circle of yellow light, circling around Mo Tianji's body like a whirlwind. It was as if a golden-armored god had suddenly appeared in the air. Whoosh! Mo Tianji landed beside Chu Yang, sweating profusely. His face was pale. Chu Yang reached out and supported him. At the same time, a continuous and abundant stream of energy was injected into Mo Tianji's body. Mo Tianji didn't pay attention to Chu Yang's help. He still looked up at the Tianji copper coin in the air. The yellow light was still circling in the air. Gradually, it turned into a complete halo. Then, a tinkling sound could be heard. It was crisp and pleasing to the ear. It was like a beautiful music from billions of years ago that had been transmitted to the present. It was also like a music from billions of years in the future that had reversed time and space and returned to the present moment. That ethereal sound was ethereal, dreamy, resplendent, and filled with the mysteries of life. It lasted for a long time. At this moment, Mo Tianji unconsciously held his breath. He stared at the Tianji copper coin in the air without blinking. He listened to every sound and didn't want to miss a single sound. That sound continued to ring. It seemed to be different every moment, but it also seemed like there was no change at all. Mo Tianji's face finally began to relax a little. Chu Yang didn't look at the Tianji copper coin in the air because he couldn't understand it. There was no point in forcing himself to look at it. He only looked at Mo Tianji's face. Seeing that Mo Tianji seemed to be relaxing, Chu Yang immediately felt relieved. This expression meant that things were developing in a good direction. However, at this moment, the copper coins suddenly danced even faster. The sound of the wind became louder. The sound of nature that didn't have any changes suddenly changed. It was completely different from before. It became sonorous and vibrating, filled with the sound of killing. That feeling was like a war between two countries. Thousands of horses and thousands of soldiers were lined up in front and fighting with their lives on the line. Mournful wails shook the sky and continued without end. At this point, Mo Tianji's face changed greatly. He became as ugly as a dead person. He suddenly opened his mouth and bit the tip of his tongue. A mouthful of red blood spurted out and covered the Tianji copper coin in the air. After the coin received Mo Tianji's blood, it gradually stabilized. The sound of killing in the sky became clearer and clearer. Mo Tianji's face became even paler. His lips trembled slightly. Blood dripped from the corner of his mouth. In the next moment, there was a loud bang in the air. It was actually the small copper coin in the air that made a loud sound like a bell. The copper coin that had been absorbing Mo Tianji's blood had gradually stopped moving. How could it suddenly make such a sound without any warning? After the copper coin made that loud sound, it fell to the ground. Mo Tianji quickly stepped forward. He made a gesture with his left hand and stretched out his right hand. The 3 copper coins fell to the ground in Mo Tianji's palm. They continued to spin on their own. After a while, they all stopped. They were all facing the sky. They were clearly just a few copper coins, but they gave people a feeling of awe. However, Mo Tianji's attention was not on the copper coin that had stopped. It was because all of his attention was on the other 3 copper coins. The 3 copper coins that were still spinning. Those 3 copper coins seemed to want to stop, but they just couldn't. They looked like they were about to fall to the ground with their backs facing the sky. However, they continued to spin shakily. In the end, the 3 copper coins actually left the range of Mo Tianji's palm and moved to his fingers. They got stuck between the gaps of his fingers. They didn't move to the left or right. They didn't move to the front or the back. They just leaned there half dead. However, the reverse side had already begun to tilt towards the upper side. Even a layman like Chu Yang could see this omen. It was obviously not good to the extreme. Chapter 2585. Mo Tianji's palms closed and his eyes closed. His face suddenly flushed red and he immediately spat out 3 mouthfuls of blood, His whole body trembled. His entire person seemed to have aged by 3 to 5 years in an instant. Extremely tired, he gasped for breath and immediately grabbed Chu Yang. "Move out immediately! Use the fastest speed to go to Big Western Paradise. Things are not good!" Saying this, he dragged Chu Yang and was about to set off. Blood was still flowing out of the corners of his mouth, but he didn't care about it at all. He only had the thought of rushing at full speed. Chu Yang made a prompt decision and didn't ask why. He raised his arms and said, "Everyone, set off immediately! The situation is urgent. Use all your strength to go to Big Western Paradise." Before his voice fell, he was already carrying Mo Tianji as he took the lead and rushed out several hundred feet. GMO, Luo Kudi, Rui Butong, and Mo Qingwu, and the others were still recuperating a moment ago. Now, they were all anxiously rushing to keep up. No one asked what had happened, but they all coincidentally burned their own life potential and turned it into advancing speed. "What's the situation? Is there a big danger on Duxing's side?" While running, Chu Yang transmitted a question to Mo Tianji on his back. Mo Tianji breathed heavily. "Right now, it's not just Duxing. Big Western Paradise has an ominous star shining, including Gu Duxing, Dong Wushang, and Xie Dan Qiong. They are all in danger of dying. We have to hurry over as soon as possible to have a chance of survival." Cough, cough, cough. "Layer is not with us. I can't divine it, but she's with Dong Wushang. I'm afraid." Mo Tianji coughed violently and immediately spat out a mouthful of blood. Chu Yang's whole body shook. He only felt all the hair on his body stand up. His speed, which had already been raised to the limit, unexpectedly increased by a bit. "This speed is still not enough. We can't make it in time." Mo Tianji swallowed a mouthful of blood with difficulty. His gaze was anxious and his heart was burning with impatience. Just now, when Mo Tianji forcibly saw through heaven's secrets, he received the most serious backlash in his life, but he didn't care about it at all. Right now, there was nothing more important than saving the lives of his 3 brothers. According to the divination, if we were to rush over at this speed, the 3 brothers would have already been reduced to dust by the time we arrived. In fact, we will all die in this battle. Mo Tianji tried his best to control himself. "Boss, the only way is to put us all into the tribulation space, and then you, cough, 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 use the tribulation sword. Only by running as fast as you can we get there. Only by gathering with tribulation. Only then will we have a chance to survive. Quick!" Mo Tianji said the last word. He once again spurted out a mouthful of blood. Then, he fainted on Chu Yang's back, and fell into a deep coma. Seeing this, Chu Yang was shocked and immediately called Chu Lur over. He handed Mo Tianji over to her. Then, he gathered everyone and said, "Everyone don't move. I'll use another method to bring you along." Putting people into the tribulation space could only be done when they were absolutely still. Just as everyone stood still, Chu Yang spun around and swept everyone into the tribulation space. Meanwhile, with a clear sword hum, the calamity sword appeared in the void and appeared in Chu Yang's hand. Sword light flashed. Only then did the long sword appear in Chu Yang's hand. Almost at the same time, Chu Yang had already activated the heaven-splitting divine technique. He focused all his attention on the calamity sword. Then, he used 3 moves in succession. These 3 moves were all the same. So what if I slaughter the world? In order to hasten his journey, Chu Yang actually used the number 1 killing sword in the world to propel himself forward. Moreover, he used it 3 times in succession. At the same time, suddenly, wind and thunder surged in the sky. The sword light only stopped for a moment. Then, with a whoosh, it drew a long line of light in midair. In an instant, it had already traveled hundreds of miles. As the ray of light streaked across the sky, the trajectory of the ray of light shattered into a long black hole. After the black hole appeared, an extremely dull sonic boom suddenly sounded. However, by this time, Chu Yang had already disappeared without a trace. Even the light of the sword had disappeared. Because at this moment, Chu Yang used "so what if I slaughter the world again" several times. He forcefully activated the sword move and rushed forward. At this moment, Chu Yang was completely crazy. He didn't care about anything. He rushed forward regardless of the cost. Chu Yang continuously activated his elemental energy and accelerated. His Dantian and Nebula were agitated at the same time. One move after another, "so what if I slaughter the world" was executed continuously. The sharpest in the world. The best killing move in the world. However, at the same time, it was the fastest sword in the world. This move, in essence, had reached the extreme realm of speed that could be achieved by becoming one with the sword. Now, Chu Yang's speed had increased by at least 10 times compared to his previous speed. His previous speed was already Chu Yang's limit. Now, it had increased by another 10 times. This speed was beyond the limit that even Di Ho had never achieved. Godly speed. Chu Yang's body maintained a parallel position in the air. His head was in front, and his feet were behind. The tip of the long sword in his right hand was pointing straight ahead. The tip of the sword flashed with wind and thunder. It forcefully broke open the space in front and opened up an unobstructed path to heaven. Chu Yang's body went straight forward like this. In just an hour's time, 5,000 miles of distance had already disappeared under the sword. Chu Yang forcefully activated the sword move and rushed forward without any scruples. Everyone who saw this scene was inexplicably shocked. They really didn't know what was happening in the sky. In fact, most people only saw a dazzling ray of light flying past quickly. When they wanted to take a closer look, this ray of light had already disappeared from their sight. The only thing that could be seen and heard was a series of explosions coming from the horizon. From the horizon came a dull sound, as if the ancient thunder god was beating the war drum. It was just another black hole that flashed by. What's going on? What's happening? Is the world going to collapse? It's too scary. This was the reaction of ordinary people. As for the eyes of experts, this ray of sword light indicated that an earth-shattering battle was about to begin. When everyone saw this ray of sword light, they felt the hair on their backs stand up. Goosebumps rose all over their bodies. A chill ran down their spines from the bottom of their hearts. A peerless expert! At least at the level of Di Ho. Even Di Ho may not be able to achieve such godly speed, right? To rush forward like this, it must be an extremely urgent matter. Once it arrives, it's bound to be an earth-shattering decisive battle. But who is this person? Who is this person? When did such a world-shocking character appear in the Heaven Imperial Court? The most intense thing is that murderous aura. He's clearly far above the sky, but I can clearly feel the murderous aura rushing straight to my eyebrows. I'm scared witless. That's right. This person is clearly an out-and-out killing god. Looking at his imposing manner, I'm afraid, even if he massacred this Heaven Imperial Court's trillions of people, he wouldn't have the least bit of change in expression. Who is this person? Who is his opponent? Let's go take a look. Don't spare me. This kind of expert, just glare at me and my soul will scatter. I'm not going to join in the fun. When I get home, I'll burn incense and kowtow, and let my ancestors bless me. Such a terrifying person, let me never meet him again in my lifetime. Yeah, such power, such a baleful aura. In the entire Heaven Imperial Court, those who can match this sword. I'm afraid the number of fingers can be counted. The one who said this was a peak-level saint expert from the big western sky. This person had just walked out from his seclusion, and was about to enter the world of mortals, thinking of dispersing his own loneliness and solitude. But as soon as he came out, he saw this terrifying nightmarish sword light. Immediately, it was as if he was struck by lightning. His whole body trembled, and he became sluggish. With my cultivation under this person's sword, I'm afraid I can't even last half a move. This peak-level saint expert trembled from head to toe, his face full of fear. I originally thought that since I've already reached the peak of saint level, Even if it's enough to proclaim myself as the overlord of this world, it's still okay to dominate a region. But now it seems, the Heaven Imperial Court has become very frightening. I'd better return to the mountain and live in seclusion. At least that place is very safe. This previously ambitious secluded expert let out a long sigh. Extremely lonely, he walked back the way he came. Henceforth, for the rest of his life, he didn't step into Jianghu again. The terror of this sword became his nightmare for the latter half of his life. In short, Chu Yang flew all the way for thousands of miles, and in the true sense, it completely boiled over. How many experts had their confidence completely shattered by this world-shaking peerless sword strike? This was a sword that shouldn't have appeared in the Heaven Imperial Court in the mortal world. Chu Yang's gaze was persistent. There was nothing else. The nebula in his dantian surged at the same time. It seemed that the nebula in his dantian was also arranging troops and setting up a battle array, intensely preparing for the imminent decisive battle. Thousands of miles of mountains and rivers, a sword flying across. At this moment, Chu Yang had already entered the territory of the big western sky. But Chu Yang didn't pause at all. He allowed the calamity sword to automatically search for Gu Duxing, Dong Wushang, and Xie Dan Qiong Zora. It led Chu Yang, whistling through the wind and thunder. At this moment, Chu Yang actually followed the sword as it moved, as if he was a sword servant. Dong Wushang, Xie Dan Qiong, and the others had already sunk into an extreme state of ecstasy. Because, after continuously moving in a spiral motion and searching for 5,000 miles, the Black Dragon sword spirit finally reacted. The little black dragon sneakily emerged from the Black Dragon sword. It shook its head and wagged its tail, gesticulating with its hands and feet. It was so excited that it couldn't be any more excited. Found it? Dong Wushang's face was pleasantly surprised, almost jumping for joy. Chapter 2586. You didn't find it? Then why are you so excited? Dong Wushang didn't understand. Amo Leia rolled her eyes at him and asked the little black dragon gently. Did you feel it? Although it's not very strong, you did feel it? The little black dragon was excited and nodded repeatedly in agreement. Then which direction is it exactly? Amo Leia was also excited. Traveling 5,000 miles in a spiral motion wasn't just a simple 5,000 miles journey. It was a journey that required a considerable amount of effort. The little black dragon stretched out its claws and seemed to hesitate for a while. Finally, it pointed to the east and then to the south. It should be in the range of this and that? Amo Leia guessed. The little black dragon shook its head and wagged its tail. Then, it should be in these two directions. Amo Leia continued to guess. The little black dragon nodded happily and did a somersault back into the Black Dragon sword. Dong Wushang was very unhappy with the dragon's attitude. This little perverted dragon is even worse than Ao Xieyun. It's clearly valuing sex over friendship. When I asked it if it found it just now, it shook its head. When you asked it, it nodded. It's simply taking liberties with my wife. This little perverted dragon, when I find Gu Duxing, I'll definitely pull it out of the Black Dragon's sword and teach it a lesson. Amo Leia rolled her eyes. Can you not be so embarrassing? It's clearly you who are stupid and blaming others for not giving you a clear hint. What you asked just now was if it was found? If he didn't find it, of course he would shake his head. He's only confirmed 2 possible directions now. It's not like he found it. It's clearly you who didn't ask the right question. You're actually blaming the little dragon for being perverted. You're actually blaming him for flirting with your wife. Is your wife so easy to flirt with? Amo Leia rolled her eyes and hugged the Black Dragon sword angrily as she walked away, ignoring a certain someone. Dong Wushang scratched his head and followed behind. Ignoring Xie Danqiong and the others who were secretly laughing, he muttered, Anyway, I just feel unhappy. You're my wife. Why should he be so close to you? Xie Danqiong had been silent all this time. But now that he had ascertained Gu Duxing's location, his mood had become very good. he unexpectedly cracked a joke and said, "You are jealous. You are purely jealous. Moreover, he's jealous of a sword spirit. This is simply a super weirdo since ancient times. Ha ha." Before he could finish, he laughed heartily. Along the way, Xie Danqiong had been worried about Gu Duxing's safety all along. But, to be honest, he was still having a good time. Dong Wushang looked at him with a black face. "Xie Danqiong, good. You must remember. Among the brothers, you have to call me Big Brother." Xie Danqiong restrained his smile and said solemnly, "Let's go quickly. Second brother Gu might be in front of us. We can't afford to delay him." Then, he took the lead and flew away. Dong Wushang, who was just about to pick up fourth brother's fight, suddenly lost his target. He scratched his head and followed after them, thinking to himself, "When I'm free, he should discuss this with boss and study it further. Could he come up with a heavy pill that could make people smarter, so that they wouldn't be defeated like they were now?" And in the sky above them, a white cloud slowly floated over. The white cloud silently transformed into a human face. It looked sideways at the people below who were in high spirits and revealed a cruel sneer. Then, it turned back into a white cloud. Then, it quietly followed. "Looks like they're about to find Gu Duxing. I didn't wait in vain." Only Saint Monarch frowned and thought to himself, "The efficiency of these guys is really not slow. I originally thought that you guys would need at least 4 or 5 days to find him. I didn't expect that you guys would find him in just 2 days. But the faster you guys find him, the faster you'll die. Looks like the time to make a move is coming soon." Only Saint Monarch muttered to himself. A white cloud suddenly floated over and turned into a mask. Then, another white cloud floated over and turned into a mask. A cruel and sinister smile appeared on his face. Even his figure had undergone a subtle change. "I'll make a move when you guys are the happiest and the most excited. At that time, you guys will show an expression of extreme joy turning into sorrow. It will certainly be very exciting. This can be considered as a small reward for your efforts." Mo Layer, Dong Wushang, and the others followed the direction that the little black dragon had determined. After walking for no less than a few hundred miles, they suddenly discovered that the destination that the little black dragon had mentioned was actually a boundless freshwater lake filled with green ripples. The lake was vast and seemed to extend to the ends of the sky. Faced with this scene, everyone was stunned. Only the black dragon sword spirit seemed to be even more excited. It was very obvious that it was pointing in a certain direction. "Over there?" Mo Layer's gaze focused and she asked with some hesitation. The little black dragon nodded excitedly. It shook its head and wagged its tail, nodding and bowing. Before it finished speaking, Dong Wushang and Xie Danqiong had already flown up impatiently. They were high in the air and flew towards the opposite direction. "Second brother Gu. Second brother Gu. I'm Xie Danqiong. Wushang and I are here. Second brother Gu. Ha! How are you now?" Dong Wushang's voice was the loudest. At this moment, the joy of finding his brother had long overshadowed everything else. It was a strong feeling of regaining something that had been lost. It was incomparably real. He firmly believed that somewhere on the opposite side, Gu Duxing was there. The feeling of the Black Dragon Sword spirit definitely couldn't be wrong. It was closely connected to Gu Duxing's soul. How could it be wrong in such matters? Xie Danqiong, who had always been calm and elegant, also had the urge to dance with joy at this moment. He even had the feeling of wanting to cry. Thank the heavens, second brother is fine. In midair, that white cloud drifted over slowly and followed Dong Wushang and Xie Danqiong to the opposite shore. Vaguely, a figure was already gradually taking shape above the clouds, but Dong Wushang and Xie Danqiong were currently in an incomparable state of ecstasy, and were completely unaware of this. Not only had they come to Gu Duxing's side, they had also brought along the Grim Reaper at the same time. The deadliest Grim Reaper, the most terrifying nightmare, the most terrifying demon. At this moment, Mo Layer, who was following closely behind, suddenly felt an unprecedented sense of oppression. She felt an inexplicable sense of discomfort in her heart. This kind of extremely negative feeling made her heart palpitate for a moment in this kind of atmosphere that should have been ecstatic. "What's wrong with me?" Amole naturally felt very strange in her heart. Gu Duxing was not only Dong Wushang's second brother, but also her own second brother. She had always admired this iron-blooded man who would rather break than bend. Now that she had finally found his whereabouts and arrived at the place where he was hiding, why was she actually still palpitating? This shouldn't be. Amole shook her head and forcibly expelled this extremely uncomfortable negative feeling. With a smile on her face, she flew into the air. Behind her, Mo Yutian and the other two guards followed closely. Everyone had a smile on their faces that came from the bottom of their hearts. His Majesty's wish was finally fulfilled. After surviving a calamity, the reunion of brothers, this was undoubtedly the most worthy thing to celebrate. For the past few days, Gu Duxing had been steadily absorbing spiritual energy from the water underground. After the first half of the day, he could already feel a huge amount of spiritual energy being drawn from the water underground. It was flowing into his body in an endless stream in an extremely orderly manner. This kind of feeling was completely different from absorbing spiritual energy from the sky. After his almost dried-up meridians received the sturdiness of the earth and the gentleness of the water, they actually slowly became warm, moist, solid, and filled up. Although the injuries that his body had endured previously still existed and did not even improve in the slightest, it was already not as uncomfortable as before. Besides, Gu Duxing even more clearly felt that he was lacking in various aspects in the past. It was precisely because of this sturdiness of the earth and the gentleness of the flowing water that made him feel that the path that he had taken previously was actually a little off. He had blindly pursued fierceness, pursued that kind of lonely feeling at the top. In itself, it was a relatively wrong direction. Without water, it can't be a sword. This was the first realization that Gu Duxing had since he was severely injured. It was as if he had seen a sword come into existence from nothing and then start to be forged continuously. The entire process of tempering actually required water. Every time the water was tempered, the impurities of the sword would be extracted from the body of the sword. Bit by bit, and then, finally, it still came out from the water, to form a complete and perfect sword. Without water there is also no sword. Blindly forging will only turn a piece of steel into a pile of trash, Gu Duxing said to himself in his heart. So, the sword can't actually leave water, Gu Duxing pondered. But my sword intent in the past was completely without water. So, I have to improve it. But where exactly do I have to start from? Gu Duxing thought for a while, and then sighed heavily. Because Chu Yan had once told him about the gentleness of water and the sword, and it was not just once. And at that time, he had once accompanied Chu Yang in searching for this gentleness of water for a very long time, but later, he just let it go. Why are you sighing? Is the healing effect not ideal? This can't be rushed. It has to be done slowly. Gu Miaoling, who was at the side, asked gently. Gu Duxing was a little ashamed. The injury is nothing. Although it didn't get better, it didn't worsen either. I have other thoughts. Indeed, if you don't personally experience it, no matter how reasonable it is, it's just a passing wind. Once it has passed, let it go. Just now, I was actually regretting something in the past. There was once a sword principle that was clearly placed in front of me, and it had already become a standard. But I didn't cherish it and let it go. Chapter 2587. Now, at the end of the road, I know that principle is actually true. It's the path to the peak that can only be achieved after countless trials and tribulations. Gu Duxing sighed, full of regret. Gu Miaoling said softly, Yes. Often, when we are young, there are many principles that our parents and elders remind us of every day. But we just listen and then forget. We never truly experience it. And we even complain that they are too long-winded. They say the same thing thousands of times. Isn't it annoying? But only when we really grow up and understand this principle through our own personal experience do we truly understand. But by the time we understand it, it may already be too late. Because the detours that we have taken, the years that we have lost, we will never turn back. In this world, isn't the most difficult medicine to find the medicine of regret? Sister Xiao Miao, who was always gentle, actually made a rare joke in order to appease her little brother at this moment. Gu Duxing still sighed deeply. He seriously recalled every word that Chu Yang said back then. The more he thought about it, the more regretful he felt. Not only did Big Boss talk about the gentle strength of water even, Big Boss also talked about the heavy strength of earth. Gu Duxing's gaze was heavy with memories. Now I understand that no matter what kind of hard metal it is, no matter which plane it was in, its original form is actually the earth. From the coincidences of the earth, these things are condensed. That's what the so-called metal is. Only by forging metal into materials can there be weapons. Continuously tempering water, continuously polishing, only then can there be divine weapons. And in this, the thing that plays the biggest role. Actually, it may not be the spiritual energy of the sky. Most of the decisive factors actually come from the soil and the water. Only by combining these three into one can one be truly invincible in the universe. Gu Duxing said in a daze. This is the true essence of the sword. Gu Miaoling exposed a gentle smile. Little brother, it's not too late for you to understand this principle now. Only when you recover from your injuries, your strength will go further. You will understand the true essence. There will be no more obstacles in your path, and you can look forward to the great Tao. This is really something to be happy about. Gu Duxing looked at her. He sighed helplessly. This was because he was very clear about Gu Miaoling's current state of mind. She was indeed happy for him. Her heart was also happy and gratified. However, Gu Miaoling herself felt the same as when she had first heard Chu Yang's words. He felt that it made sense, and he felt comfortable listening to it. But he didn't have the enthusiasm to practice it himself. Because Gu Miaoling had never experienced it. But Gu Duxing didn't say anything else, because he knew. These principles of martial arts were the same as the principles of life that had been passed down through the ages. He had never experienced it before. Or maybe it was just a sentence. Only by personally experiencing it would it become a saying of wisdom, and only then would it have meaning. This was also, there were some principles that the entire continent knew, and everyone could talk about it. However, those who could truly understand this simple principle might not even be 1 in 10,000 people. What is learned on paper is ultimately shallow. Knowing this matter must be done personally. Gu Duxing murmured. That makes sense. That's how it is. Gu Miaoling smiled faintly. You continue to cultivate and heal. I'll think of a way to go out and see if I can catch a big fish back. Be careful. Don't make any noise and attract unnecessary trouble. Gu Duxing smiled and reminded. The knot in my heart has been untied. I just need to rest for a few more days and I'll be able to move freely again. At that time, I'll have to think of a way to nurse the unconscious old Boo. Old Boo has already been unconscious for a few days. This can't go on. I know. Gu Miaoling smiled and walked out. Gu Duxing's healing had made progress. Gu Miaoling was completely relieved. She suddenly felt that even though they were underground, it was still sunny. Gu Duxing smiled faintly and continued to cultivate. He continued to absorb the earth and water elemental energy. He continued to feel the opportunity that he had once missed. He felt the luck that he had lost and regained. He could feel that as he absorbed, the energy of true spirit underground was surging towards him. Moreover, there was a faint feeling of heat in his body. This feeling was absolutely real. He would often sweat all over after cultivating for a while. Moreover, what made Gu Duxing even more surprised was that the energy of true spirit underground was actually so huge. It was almost inexhaustible. This incomparably huge energy made Gu Duxing feel incomparably shocked. It seemed that the energy of true spirit underground was much, much more than the energy in the sky. This was an unimaginable realization. The sky was incomparably vast. The energy of true spirit floating in the sky was truly inexhaustible. And underground, it existed in a solid state. It was the hardest to transmit the energy of true spirit underground. How could it store and transmit such a huge amount of energy? It was really inconceivable. Could it be that this energy of true spirit was originally floating in the sky? Over time, a part of it sank and entered the ground, and was absorbed by the ground. And the other part was light and flew up, higher and higher. Finally, it flew to an unknown place. If that's the case, doesn't it mean that the sky that we've been using to cultivate is actually the place where the energy of true spirit is the purest? And the real treasure is underground, or is it outside the sky? It's just that we cultivators have never understood and never excavated these treasures in the true sense. Gu Duxing was shocked by this thought of his. Another night passed. Gu Duxing felt that his cultivation seemed to have recovered a little. And the injuries caused by the sage were already faintly showing signs of breaking and dissolving in front of this dense energy of the earth. This feeling made Gu Duxing overjoyed. Perhaps, if he was given another half a month's time, he would be able to recover on his own. And at that time, his cultivation would definitely be able to take another step forward, another big step forward. When he faced the sage again, even if he was still no match for him, at least it wouldn't be like before. Completely unable to withstand a single blow, without any ability to resist. But at this time, he suddenly felt that his state of mind was suddenly shaken. It was as if something close to him was rapidly approaching him, and it was full of joy as it rushed towards him, wanting to throw itself into his embrace. Gu Duxing instantly understood the source of this feeling. Black Dragon's sword. Sword spirit. It must be the return of the Black Dragon sword spirit. It was a surprise that came out of nowhere. It made Gu Duxing almost faint. The Black Dragon sword, which he regarded as a close companion for life, wasn't by his side these few days. Although he didn't say it, he was definitely not used to it. Now, it actually found itself back and returned to his embrace? This was a huge surprise. How could Gu Duxing not be overjoyed? What made him even more overjoyed was that he heard two voices shouting. Second brother Gu. I'm Xia Danqiong. Wushang and I are here. These two voices made Gu Duxing tremble all over. He was so excited that he almost cried. My brothers! Are you guys here? And you guys even brought my Black Dragon sword. In such a desperate situation, to suddenly be able to reunite with his brothers, what kind of feeling was that? At this moment, Gu Duxing simply wanted to shout, I'm here. But just as he was about to shout, he suddenly stopped. Because, at this moment, it was a cold and extremely uncomfortable feeling. Suddenly it surged. This feeling made Gu Duxing shut his mouth at once. And with the fastest action, he covered the mouth of Gu Miaoling, who was about to shout out in joy. Because this sudden feeling made Gu Duxing feel a chill all over his body. That feeling, it was as if my life had already come to an end. Why do I have such a feeling? Why do I have such a feeling? My brothers outside are definitely here in person. We've been brothers for so long. Not to mention shouting, even if they were panting softly, no one would be able to pretend to be either of them in front of me, let alone two of them. And I can totally hear that they are full of energy and high spirits at this moment. Their purpose of coming here is to welcome me. Why do I have such an extreme feeling that my life has come to an end? What's the problem? What's the problem? Gu Duxing buried his head in deep thought, not daring to make the slightest move. This feeling came too suddenly, too real, so real that Gu Duxing couldn't accept it. Often, the more seriously injured one was, the sharper one's senses would be. The more one's cultivation was gone, the sharpness of one's consciousness would be several times sharper than before. If this feeling is real, it means that I'm about to face a disaster. It doesn't matter if it falls on me, but if it implicates my brothers, I won't be able to rest in peace even if I die. Regretfully, I can't act rashly at this moment. Gu Duxing frowned and sensed silently. He clearly felt the anxious and longing cries of Dong Wushang and the others, and the excitement of the black dragon's sword wanting to return to his hands. Then, Gu Duxing suddenly trembled all over. His eyes overflowed with a long-lost sharp light. I've finally found it. I've finally found the source of my fear. It's actually my black dragon's sword. As the original owner of the black dragon's sword, the person who gave birth to the sword's soul, Gu Duxing's familiarity with his black dragon's sword had already reached the point where he could see everything. He was clear about the composition of every part of the black dragon's sword. Even every characteristic of the sword's soul was clear in his heart. Now, the sword's soul was still the original sword's soul, without any damage. Moreover, it was also really eager to see him again. The only thing that wasn't right was, beside the sword's soul, there was still a ball of extremely cold energy, like a viper lurking in the dark, waiting for an opportunity to move, looking for people to devour. You're tuning into the Phoenix Knights YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.